like the budget will balance itself.
Yeah.
Now that's, if he was the CEO of a publicly traded company, he'd be fired on the spot, all right? You can't say stuff like that. It's irresponsible, it's immature, it's what a drama teacher says. Okay. Canada is in trouble. It's a G7 nation. Turkey is a G11 nation. Look around you, not around you, look outside of the USA. People see stuff happening more quickly. The USA is privileged. It's got a reserve currency status. But Bitcoin is going to become the global reserve asset. This is an aside. Over to my friend Dan Tapiero, who has managed a lot of money successfully in a macro environment, and his words were, there's no alpha left in macro. I hope I'm paraphrasing that correctly. He has decided, and since we both manage money at hedge funds, I'd like to switch the conversation to the current challenges of traditional asset management and the 60-40 portfolio, and why people need to consider alternative silos like, and I'm going to say digital assets, but you know I'm focusing on Bitcoin. So, Dan, would you expand on the 60-40 portfolio, what you think, what the future holds there?
Yeah, well, thanks. Thanks, Greg. Let me just, what he's talking about, the 60-40, is what traditional asset allocators, the exposure that they hold, and that's 60% in assets or equity and 40% in bonds. Right, I know, bonds, right. Well, and what's happened is that that's been a brilliant strategy for the last, from 1981 really until, until actually very recently. But now you have negative 7% real yields. In the US, you have $200 trillion of cash and debt, mostly negative real yields. And so, you have many pensions and insurance companies, large entities, sitting on a non-productive asset class. And there's really nowhere to go. And so $200 trillion is a lot. If you think there's 500 trillion or so of total assets in the world, there should be, and I think we're starting to see a little bit of a transition out of bonds and cash, again, a little into equity, but I think it's going to be coming into Bitcoin, into this, this I call broadly this digital asset world. The returns, obviously, I mean, I look at it as an investor, and the returns, on the one hand, you're losing money in your 30 to 40% of your portfolio versus, Bitcoin, which of course has gone up over 200% annualized since its inception. So I think that as, we have more people here. I mean, I was at the conference in 2019 and it was just, I don't know, 1,000 people or 2,000 people, 10,000 last year, 25,000. I suspect next year will be more. And, the voice is being heard, and I think we're starting to see also a greater movement from institutions. And I see this firsthand. I myself have 2 pension funds, US state pension funds, that are investors. 3 years ago, you wouldn't have seen that at all. So it's starting, it's slow, but that 200 trillion I mentioned in cash and fixed income, if you take just 10% of that, that's $20 trillion, right? I'm not saying it's all going to go into Bitcoin, but I think people are starting to see it.
Well, let's help people with the math. If 20 trillion flowed into an asset class that's capped at 21 million coins, what's 20 million divided by 21 million? You don't need a calculator for that, people. That's $1 million a coin, okay? Because we're measuring it in today's dollars. The assets are measured in today's US dollar value. So I know Orlando has some viewpoints as to the money that wants to flow in, but I wanted to expand on Dan's viewpoint. Everyone knows who Ray Dalio is, okay? Very brilliant investor, Bridgewater, that created a strategy called risk parity. He would balance his equity portfolio against a leveraged portfolio of US Treasury bonds largely. And as everyone knows, as interest rates go down, bond prices go up. So there was a buffering process that if equity prices fell, the bonds generally benefited from a flight to safety, okay? But it's easy when interest rates start at 14%, when I started trading bonds in the late 1980s, right, and they end up at under 1%, okay? That is bond price support. So Dalio made an incredibly smart business decision by leveraging the bonds, which were less volatile, against an equity portfolio. Brilliant man. Okay, it doesn't work anymore, Ray. It's fucking over, okay? Because interest rates are out now in the US 10-year at 2%, 2.6% when I looked this morning, okay? And they could be on their way back up, except the Fed's gonna have to come in and dampen interest rates because it doesn't work with the debt spiral we're in, but I digress. Listen, the Fidelity report that came out on digital assets, and I'm paraphrasing Fidelity here, it basically said there's only Bitcoin. And then they said there's other digital assets, but understand what they meant was there's only Bitcoin and then there are shitcoins, exactly, okay? Fidelity is going to move the world because if you're if you're an asset manager competing against Fidelity and they offer the silo to invest in this new asset class, you better get your game in gear or you're going to lose your clients to Fidelity. So I'm going to open the panel to the other guys. I know Orlando for sure is seeing you run $100 billion of assets. You have large pension funds. You mentioned to me that you see the interest in this new asset class. Would you like to expand on that for the audience?
Thank you, Greg. Yes.
And I will absolutely, everyone will get a chance. Beautiful.
And it's interesting what you said about a couple of pension funds. That's exactly what we're seeing. So the pension world and the sovereign world is something that, right, I've been in for a long time, 25 years. So we have deep relationships. We know these great people. And when you think about it, in that world of original source of capital, there's about $30 trillion today. And the decision makers are very small groups of people that are actually extremely talented, extremely humble, and they actually do a really, really good job of investing. They're phenomenal allocators. So this is the deal. 2 years ago, I would go around meeting all of them because that's part of what I do. And the first 5-10 minutes of the meeting, it was all about, hey, I heard you like Bitcoin. What's going on? And the individuals themselves are all big believers and personal holders of Bitcoin. But after that 5 minutes was over, then the meeting progressed and the institutions were not ready to join in this movement of adoption. Now, 6 months ago, I'm getting calls from these really large institutions saying, you know what, I'm building a small bucket here of Bitcoin. And they're experimenting. The key is, for this to really, really be big, is they have to make money. Once they dabble in, if they start making money, the floodgates will open. And you will get another step function in values.
Can I just say one thing? What's really important about that is he's referring to sovereign wealth funds as well. So when you start having these $100 billion, $500 billion entities, sovereign wealth funds, talking about exposure in Bitcoin, adding exposure in Bitcoin, the next thing is for the central bank, and the next thing is for that government. And so, you know, there's a lot of talk about, you know, wide-scale global adoption. It starts with, I think, the smart allocators you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. So if I may pick up on a little bit on what Dan said, he said the 60-40 allocation, 60 equities, 40 bonds, and he said 40% of the portfolios are in bonds, about 200 trillion. And he said there's nowhere to go. And this is really bad news because I know for sure that some of you out there are counting on your pensions. And this is very dangerous because, like the poet said, things change gradually and then suddenly. And the problem is that this bond investment is a terrible investment. I wouldn't touch a bond with a 10-foot pole. It's just the worst thing. I mean, the best thing that can happen to you is you get back your $100. That's the best thing that could happen to you.
I love this guy. I absolutely love this guy. Marcelo.
You know,
Oh, sorry. Keep going.
Just to go on that, I definitely don't have any bonds. I have the liquid portfolio. I have 60% in Bitcoin and Bitcoin equities, and then 40% in hard asset stocks like oil and gas and gold miners, and that's where I am, man.
Rock and roll. Marcelo.
Yeah. So I'm gonna give you a little perspective of, what my life has been. And I started seeing what I call the cell phone revolution, and then I became the CEO of Sprint and merged with T-Mobile and enjoy an era of what's amazing, innovation, disruption, cell phone. After that, we enter something incredibly unique, which some call it the digital revolution or the AI revolution. And for the last 4 years, I've been the CEO of SoftBank International, and we're investing in disruptors of the digital economy and investing about $1 billion a week and manage about $300 billion. Then I started seeing what I like to call the Bitcoin revolution. And about 3 weeks ago, I quit my job at SoftBank in order for me to learn more and start putting all my knowledge towards this new revolution that we're seeing. And I like to call it the Bitcoin revolution, which is what's going to happen next.
All right. Whoa. Wow.
So, wow, eh? At times like this, my sister would tell me, don't say anything, and she's a stand-up comic, so she knows when to sit down. But unfortunately, we have a couple more minutes to burn. That's not unfortunate. I mean, I'm just reveling in this opportunity. Marcelo, can you tell us, you started to expand on it. You've shared with us your exposure to Bitcoin. One of the things I get in trouble with the Bitcoin maxis with is that I'm not 100% in Bitcoin. Now, it's just not the way I've managed risk, and I don't think it's the way the gentlemen on the stage have managed risk either. I'm not saying don't be 100% in Bitcoin, but what I'm trying to say is you don't need to be 100% in Bitcoin as a percentage of your portfolio in order to benefit from the asymmetry of the trade to the upside. I'm going to do just fine. My 40% exposure, and I think we talked about different. Now, I'm not saying go out there and get 40%. I'm saying get the heck off zero. And here's the funny thing. When you get somebody to invest in Bitcoin for the first time, and let's say you get them to 5%, right? And they have 95% in other stuff, it's like they forget the 95%, right? It's they're focused on this 5%. Chill the fuck out, okay? Sit down and I'll talk to you guys in 20 years. The Bitcoin price is a rounding error. And I mean that sincerely. None of us are smart enough to say whether it's worth 25,000 or 55,000. What we are smart enough to say is there's a high probability that it goes way the heck higher from here. And you're supposed to actually be happy if the price goes down so you can buy some more. For the fucking kids. For the kids.
I agree.
For the believers.
Okay, now listen. I'm a selfish boomer. I'm pathetic. You fucking boomers are ruining the lives of our kids. Grow a backbone. Pay your debts. And I'll share something bigger with you. I was suicidal. I spent 30 years managing risk. It takes a toll on you and your brain. And then I hit some other bumps in the road. And one of the reasons I was suicidal is because I was so discouraged about the state of the economy and the future that I was passing to my kids. Now, I had found Bitcoin, but I didn't study Bitcoin like I did. And once I did, I found hope. And I'm not here to preach. I guess I am. I'm preaching to you that this is hope. It's freedom. It's beautiful. It's technologically sound. But you don't need to be all in. That being said, if you are, God bless you. At this point, opening the floor to anything you guys want to talk about. And that includes, you know, Foss, just get off the stage and leave it to us. Go ahead.
I think you made a
but
really
one,
important point about not being all in, but not being at zero. I mean, you don't have to be all in. And furthermore, when you buy your first Bitcoin, and I've orange pilled a lot of friends, the next thing they do is they start checking the damn price on their iPhone watch every 10 seconds, you know. The hell with that. You know, when you buy a house, you're not checking the price of your house every 10 minutes, right? Just sit on it for 10 years, 20 years, and get on. And that's what needs to happen. Sorry.
The point I wanted to add, consistent with that, is you don't have to be 100%, but you don't have to be the first one. You don't have to be the earliest one. I'm certainly not. There's some pioneers here that saw it a lot earlier than I did. I spent 30 years living in San Francisco doing tech, and in this community and in these dinners, that was all around me. I just wasn't paying attention. It took that time to stop. Pandemic came, more time to think. What's important to you? What are your values? And then you see this, and you're just overwhelmed with the importance of it and what it means to society as a whole. It's consistent with the movement and with the revolution that Marcelo spoke about. Is when I started looking into it, is how open the community is. Everyone would talk to me, everyone would be ready to share thoughts, everyone would be ready to teach me about it. And what I've found in my sector is anybody who takes the time to slow down and really understand what's going on becomes a big believer in it.
So I like to say that I moved. First, when I got into Bitcoin was because I have an older son who was just beating the hell out of me every day. He says, Dad, you're the only guy who doesn't get this, and you think you're a smart guy investing in tech and all that. So you got to pay attention to your kids. So I actually took a step back and say, what is going on in the world? And the world is a fascinating place today because of AI. Pretty much every company, every company, and every function is going to be massively, massively disrupted. But the big disruptors are basically centralized companies, right? Google centralizes every search with every web page. So everybody has to use Google. It's sort of like a monopoly. You look at Facebook, the ledger is, they're centralizing identity. You look at JP Morgan, they're centralizing all assets. And the new world is going to be one in which you're going to be able to transact on a peer-to-peer basis without the need for JP Morgan or all these banks to take a toll as we transfer value. And then the big aha moment came to me when I realized, what is the internet? What has the internet done? Google and others. They have allowed the free flow of information, but they were never able to perfect the free flow of value.
Yeah.
And the powerful thing of Bitcoin and everything that's going on, what I like to call the next 5 years are fascinating because AI is going to continue to disrupt, while at the same time you have a new force disruption, which is a whole digital currency, which is being led by Bitcoin, and that's just incredible. The fact that we're going to be able to transact on a peer-to-peer basis without these central intermediaries that attack our privacy and that attack our ability to just send our assets from whoever we want to whoever we want. That was a big moment for me that allowed me to move from a FOMO investor, say I'm scared that I'm the only idiot who's not investing, to a fundamental believer that we're into something that is relatively big and bigger than anything that all of us must have experienced before.
Yeah, he's orange-pilled for sure.
I would just say one thing, really. If any of you are worried that you're late to this, just remember that only 2 to 3% of the world have crypto accounts or crypto wallets. So, I mean, the way I see it over the next 10 years, any sort of reasonable adoption rate, I think we're going to be up at least 10 times from that in the next 10 to 15 years. So I always say to my analysts, it's never too late to do the right thing. I think that's especially the case here.
This is like being in the internet in 1994.
Right.
And if we all knew what happened to the internet in 1994, a few people have turned into the richest people in the world by betting on the internet in 94.
Yeah,
and I think Bitcoin, where it's today, is basically where the internet was in 94, 95 from an adoption curve.
Good point. However, I would qualify that a little bit, Dan. Not crypto, Bitcoin.
Yeah.
There's a lot of crypto out there, you know?
I know.
And there's plenty of shit coins in that crypto.
Love it.
So what's the point of moving out of one shit coin and moving to another one?
The current shit going being the US dollar is what I infer. So guys, look, I got involved in Bitcoin in 2016. I mentioned my health challenges. Bitcoin in 2016 when I got involved was under $1,000 US a Bitcoin. Bitcoin is today a better investment on a risk-adjusted basis at the current price. Okay, don't overthink that fact. What has happened? COVID. The response by the government has painted them into a corner where it is mathematically impossible to stop printing money. They won't tell you that. All you got to do is run the math. With the coupon on the debt making the denominator grow, the numerator grow way faster than the global GDP can possibly grow to keep up with it. It's mathematical certainty. There's very few things in life that are 100% certain, but fiat debasement is one of them. Guys, this is so simple. Anyway, I digress. We have 6 minutes left. I'm gonna finish off with something, but I want anybody here to give 2 minutes, let's say, anything, any subject for the audience. Up to you guys.
Okay, so hyperinflation really damages two kinds of people. The most vulnerable. Number one, it ends any pension that you might be expecting down the road. Your savings are wiped out. So people that depend on their savings are very hardly hit. Young guys, we can always get a salary increase, move from here to there, then we make it. Older people who have saved all their lives and depending on a pension, they're going to have the hard end of the stick coming to them. The other kind of people that are really damaged by hyperinflation are the poor people because they don't have assets. So it's not a pretty sight. And we should be able to point the finger at who's responsible for this. Because if you and I go around there printing money, we get put in jail for fucking counterfeiting, right? And they get promoted to the Treasury.
I just want to say, Greg, thank you for sharing that. We need you in this world. You're the best.
Wow.
And you are just absolutely awesome. And we need more Gregs out there. Really, really, really amazing. Wow. And look, I just want to end with how proud I am of this community. When I hear all these criticisms from the establishment in financial services about, oh, this is used by bad people and fraud and this, come on. This is a group of phenomenal people that want what is right, that want freedom, that want democracy, that want to cross borders. It is just an awesome movement, and you're here. And, of course, the adoption is going to increase over time. What do you think? Is it going to go down? Do you think less young people are going to be involved or more? No brainer. Do you think the dollar is going to go up or down? It's very, very, very telling. So thank you for having me, and I've really enjoyed being part of this.
Marcelo.
So, we've experienced, the greatness of Bitcoin and the ability that we can help people that needs it. What I've seen is, just in this year alone, what happens when the government controls something. When there was money that was sent to the truckers in Canada, the government seized all that money because they use traditional ways. When we send money to help people in Ukraine and we've used Bitcoin, that money is getting there, and absolutely no Russia or nobody can stop us from sending money to Ukraine. So it's been an incredible use. Yeah. And I will tell you something for the ones that were here last year at this exact same conference in Wynwood. You have no idea the impact that you have created in my life. After seeing so many crazy people together, That's what woke up my interest to say, I no longer want to be just a tech investor. I want to change my life, and I want to put a big part of my life to understand this new way, which is Bitcoin. So thank you all for inspiring me last year.
Yeah, I would just end with, I think it's important to understand that this, the invention of Bitcoin, as I like to call it, is a unique invention in the history of financial and monetary history. And so, if you're thinking that you're not sure about it, all of certainly my work and my focus on it, I really think it's bigger than anything I've certainly seen or studied. And it's because it's that ledger of truth, right? We've never had truth.
Bitcoin is truth, ladies and gentlemen. I'm so proud to be on stage with these guys. I'm proud of the Bitcoin community. I've met through the Bitcoin community guys and ladies that I call friends and dear friends now. Guys like Jeff Booth, Preston Pish. I've met a doctor in Madison, Wisconsin, who's involved in an education platform with me because he didn't understand the legacy financial system, and he actually didn't understand the paper I wrote on bond math because, it's actually first and second derivatives are not grade 11 math. But God bless him, he and I have created, along with 4 other global partners, an education platform called LookingGlassEducation.com, where we explain the problems of the current financial system that they don't teach you in high school because they don't want you to know. Because the fiat Ponzi cannot be exposed. I love these guys. I'm proud to be on stage with them. I love you guys. Bitcoin is hope. And I'm going to leave you with this. Last year, at this conference, I met a group of young Guatemalan kids that wanted to start Bitcoin Lake, modeled after Bitcoin Beach in El Salvador. And Jose Lemus and his team at Ibex Mercado had this vision for Guatemala. And then Jack Mahlers, your dog, you came on stage six hours later and you announced you onboarded a fucking country. And I'm like, and these guys are in Guatemala and they live 3 hours away. And they got in their cars and they went to Guatemala and they started the merchant solution for Guatemala. Beautiful kids. I invested in their company a token amount, a lot of money for me, but they just raised $4 million. And they are now onboarding the city of Miami. How cool is that? That's in 1 year, okay? Jose, my friends at Ibex Mercado, you're changing the world. And that's what Bitcoin does. Finally, on behalf of Canada, and thank you for the trucker support. You can vote whatever way you want. You can vote whatever way you want. But Bitcoin is freedom. Thank you. Thank you.
Bravo.
Bitcoin is hope. Well said by Greg Foss. Welcome back to the Marathon Desk hosted by Bitcoin Magazine here at Bitcoin 2022 in Miami. I'm Natalie Brunell. I've traded in my mainstream news desk for this amazing Bitcoin Marathon Desk, and I have an amazing panel with me. We're going to be discussing the conference and all sorts of Bitcoin things. So I want to introduce someone you might recognize, Dave Portnoy, founder of Barstool Sports. Q, he's our anchor of Bitcoin Magazine Live, and Elise Colleen, who founded Stillmark. So first, I'll just throw it right out to you guys. What are you thinking about the conference and the last panel?
No, I've been loving it. To see the conference from 1 year ago to where we've come today, twice the size, G8A1, it is starting to get lively all around us here at the news desk. We have a giant volcano that we're sitting right in front of. You know, it's come full circle, and we're excited to be here.
It's Dave's first, right?
It is
Bitcoin
my first
conference.
Bitcoin. Yeah, I'm taking it all in. It's pretty huge, pretty remarkable. But yes, I'm taking it all in. First one.
What's your first impression?
It's huge. Like, I didn't know what to expect,
More
really.
than 25,000 people.
Is it 25,000
More than
people?
25,000 people.
Yeah, I didn't know what to expect because I didn't get my credentials, got lost, or I wasn't paying attention. So I came through the front. I had to like battle my way in. I had to convince them I was a speaker. So I'm getting the full experience, parking, fighting for parking all the way in. But yeah, it's a full-blown event.
Elise, how many have you been to?
I'm lost count at this point, but this is the one I look forward to every year.
That's awesome. Well, talk to me a little bit about this panel. We heard from the Billionaire Capital Allocators panel, and I thought some interesting things were talked about because, you know, one thing that Greg Foss said is that he met a doctor, right? And the doctor was trying to figure out Bitcoin. And it's just, that's his job. His day job as a doctor. We have billionaires who have a lot of people probably to help them understand this technology. But for the average person, you know, I come from a humble background. It's not easy to learn about Bitcoin. So what do you guys think about just, you know, we hear about billionaires who are allocating capital to this type of asset. But for the average person, I mean, it took you a couple exposures, and you're still skeptical.
Yeah, I feel like now it's been 7-8 years. I've gone in and out.
Yeah.
I had a guy, Marty Bent, we talked about a little bit, who worked for me, who was trying to convince me. And then I had the Winklevoss twins give me a whole speech that made me think it was totally fake, and I got out. And then I got in about a year ago. So I've been in, out. To be honest, I still am not sure I truly understand all of it, but I know enough people, conferences like this are in it. That's the place I got to be.
Yeah, and one thing that you were saying is that's what convinces you that it's not going away, right? Now we have these big companies. We have people that are putting a lot of money behind it. Is that what convinces you that it's got legs?
Yeah, I think you get to a certain threshold or momentum, and it's like the breaking point where enough people are behind something involved that it's not going anywhere, despite what you hear like a Peter Schiff say or things like that. One of my arch nemesis is now on Twitter.
What are you guys looking forward to for the rest of the day? We're going to hear an announcement from Samson Mount. He says he's going to do a mic drop, so it's going to be pretty big, right?
I mean, Elise and I were actually chatting just about that. This Samson Mount announcement should be one of the biggest ones coming out.
Oh, really?
I'm just going to set the expectation that if he's not announcing on behalf of some sort of a nation state, either adopting Bitcoin or doing something pro-Bitcoin, I'm going to leave it disappointed. But, you know, I like to set the bar very high.
I'm looking forward to some of the new experiences that happen here at the conference by interacting with founders and startups. Greg mentioned one at the end of that last panel, which is Ibex Mercado. Ibex is the payment sponsor for the conference. And throughout the conference center, they have all these different new experiences about how to use Lightning and how to integrate it into your e-commerce experience and brick and mortar too. And so I'm looking forward to playing around with that this afternoon.
Awesome. Dave, what are you most looking forward to? Or what's your biggest question about Bitcoin? If you're still skeptical, like,
honestly, I was
what are you
interested
trying
to see the people. Like, I want to see who is attending this thing and see all the people that were here, the different companies. But yeah, the overall vibe, feel the people. Are we getting like crazy people in my mind, or are we getting everyday normal people? That's kind of what I want to see.
And have you tried the pizza in Miami?
I've had all the pizza in Miami. 11th Street's the best. So I live here, but I'll shout out 11th Street. Relatively new. That's my favorite.
Yeah. Are you going to pay for it in Bitcoin or no?
They probably don't accept it. I actually went to a pizza place here and got absolutely ridiculed for selling my Bitcoin.
Yeah.
They were just calling me paper hands and things like that. I am diamond now, but yes.
Yeah. By the way, I saw potentially an altcoin portfolio that hasn't been performing well.
Shitcoin portfolio.
A shitcoin portfolio that's not been doing Dave so well. So.
But I'm still holding 40,000 down to 2,000.
We hope by the end of this experience, you go from paper hands to diamond hands again.
That's right.
Hold on. I'm already diamond hands. I'm not kidding. I have 29 Bitcoins. I'm holding them for life.
Diamond hands.
I'm going to die with them.
Coming up is an announcement from Samson Mao. You don't want to miss it. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Marathon Desk, hosted by Bitcoin Magazine, live at the Bitcoin Conference in Miami. If you're watching this at home, you better come next year. All right? So check it out. Next panel coming up.
forgot that we're live streaming all this, so the commentary booth needs a little time in between to comment on the goings on here. But what I was saying was last year, we made history at this conference. And I have a feeling we're about to do it again. So please help me in welcoming the former CSO of Blockstream, someone who's currently focused on nation-state Bitcoin adoption, Mr. Samson Mao.
All right, thanks, man. All right, thanks everyone. So my talk today is about nation-state Bitcoin adoption. I guess you guys like that, right? All right, so first up, I'll make a small announcement. I have a new Bitcoin company called Jan3, named, of course, for January 3rd, the Genesis block. This is a Bitcoin company that will focus on Bitcoin and Layer 2 tech like Liquid and Lightning. We'll be taking over some of Blockstream's projects, Raretoshi, the NFT platform, as well as Aqua, a Bitcoin and Liquid wallet. We've also signed an MOU with the government of El Salvador to build digital infrastructure for the country and for Bitcoin City. So Jan3's mission is to accelerate hyper-Bitcoinization. We might work on a lot of different projects. The mandate is quite wide. So operating Bitcoin wallets, talking to nation states, central banks about how to secure their own Bitcoin, maybe even just generic infrastructure projects that we can weave Bitcoin into. We've also raised $21 million at a valuation of $100 million. And our investors include Alistair Milne, Chen Wang, the co-founder of F2 Pool, and of course, Alzante Capital, launched by Max Kaiser, the high priest of Bitcoin, and Stacy Herbert, the volcano blonde. So we're going to be doing a lot of cool stuff. Keep an eye out. All right. My timer's not running, by the way, so I'm just going to take as long as I want, right? OK, now it's running. So everything started in El Salvador. Everything started in El Salvador. This was where the Bitcoin law was first passed. And this is where they launched the first Bitcoin bond, the Volcano Bond. And it's under the leadership of President Nayib Bukele, and it's too bad he couldn't make it today, that we now have this beacon of hope and freedom. So what we have to do is defend that. On one of my trips to El Salvador, I met this guy. He's ex-military from Scotland. He moved to El Salvador. He's moving his whole family there. And he sat down, and he gave me a very serious look, and he told me, what you have here in El Salvador is a beachhead. And what that means is we have a small foothold for Bitcoin nation-state adoption. What we need to do is get more nation-states and even cities to adopt Bitcoin. We have to defend what we have and gain more ground. So that was why I decided to leave Blockstream and focus more on nation-state Bitcoin adoption. Because I think now is a pivotal time in human history, and we need to move things forward faster. So what we need is more nation-state Bitcoin adoption. And I believe it's not going to happen the same way as in El Salvador. It's going to be organic, and it's going to be bottoms up. It's going to be grassroots. El Salvador is a unique case. They were able to pass the Bitcoin law rather easily. But every country, every jurisdiction will have a unique path to Bitcoin adoption. So legal tender is one way. Another way is de facto legal tender. So in the case of Lugano in Switzerland, this was done by Paulo, and he basically orange-pilled the city. But because there's no capital gains on Bitcoin in Switzerland, the government is accepting it for payments for anything, parking tickets, taxes, you name it. But there's no capital gains, so it is, in fact, de facto legal tender. But there's other clever ways to do it, too. So I've been working with a group in Guatemala as well, and we've been looking at the laws there. They have legislation already talking about foreign currencies. So what you can do is declare Bitcoin as a foreign currency because their neighbor, El Salvador, is already using Bitcoin as legal tender. So there's going to be custom, bespoke solutions for different places around the world. And we need more of these. So I might have one today. So a few weeks ago, I was sitting in what I consider to be a Bitcoin city. I was sitting with a group of friends. We're having dinner at a restaurant in this city. And there's places to stay, there's businesses, there's offices. It's still early, but they have something there. And this place is called Prospera, on the island of Roatan in Honduras. They've been building up steadily and gaining ground. And I'd like to welcome to the stage the president of Prospera, Joel Baumgar.
Woo! Thank you, Samson.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, Honduras Prospera Incorporated is the promoter and organizer of the Prospera jurisdiction on the Caribbean island of Roatan in Honduras. And we have three major announcements today. So first, as Samson said, Bitcoin within Prospera operates as legal tender. That means no capital gains tax on Bitcoin. You can transact freely using Bitcoin, and you can pay taxes and fees to the jurisdiction in Bitcoin. You can also start a Bitcoin business in the jurisdiction using the regulatory framework of your choice, and all done in an AML and KYC compliant manner. Second announcement, enabling Bitcoin bonds. Starting today, the Prospera jurisdiction can enable the other municipalities in Honduras or other companies or political subdivisions outside of the United States to float Bitcoin bonds from within the Prospera jurisdiction. This incredibly innovative financial instrument created by Samson is an incredible way to bring foreign direct investments to the part of the world that needs it most. And within Prospera, the mechanism to do that is completely AML and KYC compliant. And thirdly, if you want to invest directly in Honduras Prospera Incorporated, you can invest directly in our security token convertible note offering, which is live for accredited investors on the Securitize platform. And you can do all of that in compliance with US legal and regulatory systems and receive equity in the form of a security token. So my contact info is on the screen. Please take a quick snap with your phone. We'd love for you to reach out. Exciting things are happening in Prospera, and you are welcome to be part of it. Thank you so much, Samson.
Thanks.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. I'm running out of time. Fuck. Okay, there's more. There's always more. I promised 3 mic drops, right? I don't have a mic. So next, this one's cool. We have Madeira. This is an autonomous region of Portugal, and they will be adopting Bitcoin. I'd like to welcome to the stage President Miguel Albuquerque.
Thank you. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to be here. As the government of Madeira and the president of the government, I believe in the future and I believe in Bitcoin. You want to be in the future, my island, my government, and you want to say to you that now Madeira it's a fantastic place to live, to work, with a fantastic environment, fantastic modern conditions in infrastructures. And I want to say to you a good news. Individuals in Madeira that sell and buy Bitcoin don't pay taxes. They don't pay, they are not subject to personal income taxes. The second good news, if you offer fantastic conditions for everyone that wants to come to Madeira. We have the rate for corporations in a special free zone is 5%, and the general in the rest of the territory, it's lowest, one of the lowest in Europe, 14%. I have to say to you that me and Samson and Jean Tree is going to continue to work to the future and to work to create in Madeira a fantastic environment for Bitcoin. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you. Oops. All right. Running out of time. Don't kick me off yet. Now I have Senator Indira Kempis to give an update on Mexico. Uncle Ricky, please pay attention. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Okay.
Hi, Bitcoiners. How are you? Well, in Mexico, 67 million people are not included in our financial system. Bitcoin is the answer to solve this problem. Through financial inclusion and financial education, the Mexican people can have a better quality of life, and we can reduce social inequality around the country. Therefore, we have already been submitting bills to guarantee financial inclusion and financial education as a constitutional right for our population, for our freedom. Additionally, in 2 months, we will propose legislation to modify regulations in fintech and in monetary law.
So it's Bitcoin law.
And we have a message for our president. We are looking forward to sitting down and grabbing coffee with you to talk about this plan. Bitcoin as legal tender in Mexico now. So,
Okay. I accept the invitation. Thank you.
a cup of coffee. Thank you so much, Samson, for being with us in this journey. And thank you to you, too.
All right, thank you. Okay, they're going to kick me off soon. I got to wrap up. So this is what I've managed to get done in about a month. And I'm just one guy. There's 25,000 of you here, probably another 100,000 watching online, and there's millions of us around the world, Bitcoiners. We're going into dark times. Inflation, CBDCs, surveillance, you name it. Bitcoin is the way to fix all of this, but it takes all of us to use Bitcoin to reach that goal. We can have a free world and increase freedom, but it's up to all of us to make that happen. So let's go out and do something and make it happen. Bitcoiners are already mobilizing around the world. In Canada, Brad Mills, NVK, and I were getting ready to do something for Canada. Other groups are mobilizing. There's a group in Guatemala. But we are everywhere, and we're going to make this happen. Thanks very much.
Across the world. We're hearing really big announcements here. We're live on the Marathon Desk, hosted by Bitcoin Magazine at Bitcoin 2022. I'm your host, Natalie Brunell. I'm joined by an amazing panel. Dave Portnoy of Barstool Sports, Ben Askren, former UFC fighter, and Alex McShane, also of Bitcoin Magazine. First of all, please subscribe to this page, like this video so more people see it. And we've got to discuss this because nation states are adopting Bitcoin, small regions, autonomous regions, islands adopting Bitcoin, and we're hearing potentially Mexico. So I'm going to throw it to Dave first. What was your reaction to this? I mean, pretty exciting.
Yeah, I mean, you guys are going to have to explain what that exactly means to me. Like, what it's replacing their current currency. I mean, you can use Bitcoin here, too. So I don't know what that means. So somebody smarter can explain it.
Well, it looks like more places you're going to be able to use it in tandem with, say, their foreign currency or the U.S. dollar. A lot of people obviously using the U.S. dollar, but I think its strength as the global reserve currency is just weakening so much. Ben, what did you think about, some of these announcements by Samson, who said he was going to have a mic drop moment?
I don't know if it was big enough to do a mic drop. In all fairness, Samson. But what it made me think of is a sovereign individual, which is kind of a Bitcoiner book about how people are going to be able to choose where they live, and they're going to have laws that speak to them. And so with Prospera and I think it's Mediera, they have Bitcoin-friendly laws, and I'm sure they're going to try to attract a lot of Bitcoin companies and Bitcoiners to those places.
Yeah, so if you're just tuning in, some of the announcements that were made were Prospera, an island in Honduras, Madeira, which is an autonomous region in Portugal. Apparently, it's an archipelago of islands. Sounds like a place I want to go. And a senator from Mexico spoke that they're going to introduce potentially a Bitcoin law. So Samson, I think, is going to speak to the president. Alex, what's your reaction?
I'm just impressed with Samson. He's stepped away from his career to take on this new role as a Bitcoin ambassador to nation states, and he's showing us what he's accomplished in just a few months. We've got Bitcoin in Madeira, autonomous region of Portugal. We've got Prospera, an island in Honduras, and he's meeting with the president to discuss Bitcoin as legal tender in Mexico. I mean, I think this is great. This is a fantastic win. I tend to agree with Ben. Probably can't top that El Salvador announcement. Hard to beat from last year.
Maybe next year.
Maybe next year.
So is it just a travel ad for these companies, basically?
No, I think so, Dave. I think it's important is when these companies hold the United States dollar as a federal reserve, as a reserve currency, and it's devaluing itself, that's going to hurt them, right? Because they're holding all their wealth in dollars.
Right.
And if they hold it in Bitcoin and Bitcoin increases in value, then their reserves increase also.
Okay.
Yeah, you guys are learning that Dave's still very skeptical about
We'll
Bitcoin.
get him.
Like
Oh,
maybe
no,
some of you are.
I'm in on it. Just
He's
sometimes
a bullish bear on Bitcoin.
I mean, I don't think I'm walking down the street and being like, what was the name of one of these countries?
Prospera.
Prospera just went Bitcoin, and people are like, oh my God, I don't know that that's happening.
Every little step counts. And, one of the things Michael Saylor has talked about,
That's
he's
the guy
one
who
of the
buys
next
it all, right?
speaker.
That's
Yeah,
the guy
I mean,
that
he's
buys
one of the
it all.
best speakers on Bitcoin, right? Michael has been saying that a lot of the currencies, they're gonna collapse into the dollar,
Yeah, I mean,
and
it's
then
happened.
the dollar potentially, maybe into Bitcoin. But right now, you can't put your money in anything that's not a melting ice cube except for Bitcoin.
I think this actually mimics the Michael Saylor model of coming to Bitcoin first from a country lens as a defensive tool to prevent you from leaking your assets through, through the
100%.
currency, from leaking the value of them.
I can't recommend the Sovereign Individual enough, though. Really great book, and just speaks to, hopefully, we as individuals, the nation-state model is going to go away, and we're going to get to choose the region that we want to live in based on their laws and regulations.
Totally. People are going to vote with their feet. All right, we've got
Absolutely.
less than a minute left. So anything you guys are really looking forward to in this conversation? Michael Saylor, Kathy Wood, the future's bright.
This is going to be the Giga Chat of Giga Chat combos. We've been looking forward to this all morning.
I don't know what they're talking about, but I love these two, so let's do it.
So we're here at the Marathon Desk, hosted by Bitcoin Magazine, live at the Bitcoin Conference. Make sure to tune back in. We're here between the conversations. We're reacting live to all these announcements. So next up is Michael Saylor and Kathy Wood, and join us for the chat and the banter afterwards.
Oh, yeah.
Thanks.
Introduce the next panel, I want to share with you guys an anecdote. Over the past 2 years, I've been attempting to orange pill people in my life, as I'm sure many of you have as well. And my father and mother have been one of those. And I've been particularly effective with my dad, who incidentally I brought here with me to this conference, and it's amazing to see him witness all of this. And side note, if you are orange pilling family members, just be careful, right? Because you might be sitting around a family dinner sometime and someone brings up like a critique of Bitcoin. And if you've done too good of a job, the family member that you orange pilled might like jump down their throat if they're not calling out fiat as a scam. So just take it easy and be careful you don't create too many monsters in your family. But the reason why I bring him up is because I brought him to an event last night. And after we were there meeting tons of great people, learning a ton, all that kind of stuff, he remarked to me, man, everybody's so positive. Everybody's so happy. Everybody's so humble. Everyone's so polite. Everyone's so smart. And I was like, yeah, that's Bitcoin. That's what this is all about. People are engaged and motivated and enthusiastic for the future we have in store now that we have a tool like Bitcoin. And so this next panel is going to be discussing the bright orange future that is Bitcoin. So please help me welcome to the stage Kathy Wood, the founder, CEO, CIO of ARK Invest, and Michael Saylor, the GigaChat himself, CEO of MicroStrategy.
Well, Kathy, I just wanted to dispel one question I've been getting all morning as I walk around the show. People are asking me whether or not I'm still bullish on Bitcoin. And I would like to, just clarify that I am more bullish than ever on Bitcoin. The future's bright. So, we're here to talk about what we see in the future. And you've spent a career in institutional investment and capital markets, looking at it from the point of view of an investor. And I spent my career attempting to attract money from people like you, running a company in the public market. And so I think we're both half of the coin. And that's why it's exciting to talk with you today. So, in my mind, I got three main areas: the political, macroeconomic, regulatory environment. What's going on there in the next year to 2 years? And the second is the capital markets and what's going on with large pools of money, the people running the trillions and trillions of dollars, I guess hundreds of trillions of dollars. And then the third is technology. And of course, you love technology, you know the capital markets. We both have political opinions.
Yes.
Okay. So why don't we start with politics and regulation and economics? What do you see as we look forward, and how do you think it's going to affect Bitcoin?
Well, I think the most interesting thing that's happened, and we met someone from Mississippi, I think a congressman from Mississippi, and I'm seeing the politics around Bitcoin changing radically because it has become, the single issue that some people are voting on, and this is bipartisan. And even where we've moved in St. Pete, because people know that I'm very Bitcoin focused, the politicians have come to me and said, I want to pull together a room of Bitcoin enthusiasts, and I really want to learn from them what they want from us. Think about that. Think about that. That is a radical shift over the last few years. The other thing that I see, so a year ago, roughly, when Janet Yellen was appointed Treasury Secretary, I remember her first comments about Bitcoin were money laundering, nefarious characters, environmentally damaging. And then 2 weeks ago, someone's whispering in her ear, and we talked about this, you think it might be Gary Gensler. There is someone whispering in the ears of politicians, if you want to lose, if you want the U.S. to lose out on this, one of the most amazing innovation platforms of all times, you keep talking like that. So she has changed her tune. So I'm very positive here. And of course, we're meeting people from around the world, just met from Honduras, Mexico. I think the movement is spreading pretty quickly now.
Yeah, I think the last 12 months has been just a 180-degree turn. If you roll back 12 months, you had so many smart people that had a lot of money and power saying, Bitcoin looks too good to be true. It's so good, someone's going to ban it. Right? We heard that. And I think a couple of weeks ago, with the executive order, what we had was the President of the United States giving a green light to Bitcoin. you have a one-page memo and it says, whereas 40 million Americans, rely upon this and this is part of their future, I hereby direct every government agency to get educated on Bitcoin and figure out how you incorporate it into the government. And I think that if I scan the last 100 years of history and I ask, when's the last time the President of the United States directed the government to embrace a new asset class? The answer is never. So I think that Bitcoin should be taking a victory lap for what happened here just in the past few weeks in the United States government. Because a year ago, Bitcoin was, maybe it was Eastern technology and it wasn't Western technology, and maybe the government was going to ban it and we're afraid of it. And what happened in the last 12 months is Bitcoin moved west, Bitcoin has been embraced. The administration has given a green light to Bitcoin. And, Congress and the Senate are enthusiastically figuring out Bitcoin, and now there's a little jockeying, I think, about who can be the most pro-Bitcoin politician.
Yes, bipartisan. This is a bipartisan issue. It's bringing our country together in many ways, which is, given what we've just been through, so shocking. The one thing that I will say we need to watch out for is, in China a few years ago, it was blockchain technology all the way, we're going to lead the way. And then, of course, they banned everything in favor of their own CBDC, of course, the digital yuan. I don't hear talk about that here, and I haven't heard much talk about, hey, this is going to displace the dollar as the reserve currency of the world. That's very good that we're not hearing that kind of rhetoric, but I am sure as the elections evolve, someone will raise it as an issue. Nonetheless, I think the momentum is clearly behind Bitcoin now.
I mean, the momentum is clearly behind Bitcoin. Yes. A lot of people have anxiety about regulation, and they ask me, "Aren't you afraid?" And I do not have anxiety about regulation. When I look at this, I say, "Yeah, there's a lot of stuff to be worked through. FASB's working through some accounting issues. FDIC's working through some banking issues. SEC's working through some security issues. The administration's working through all their issues." But regardless of how fast that happens and how sharp that occurs, I don't think there's any outcome other than favorable for Bitcoin. And I think that what I say over and over again is Bitcoin is the ethical safe haven for any public figure, and it is the technical safe haven for any technical company, and it is the financial safe haven for any investors. So if you have anxiety, I think that people that are thinking about this are going to realize that Bitcoin is the risk-off crypto asset network, and all of this regulation is going to create volatility, but ultimately the single number one most important issue is you walk into a room with people that have collectively 10 or 20 trillion dollars, and you tell the story, and they say, well, Bitcoin sounds better than gold, and Bitcoin sounds better than owning a big tech stock, and Bitcoin sounds like the solution to all the world's problems, and it's just so good that someone is going to take it away from me because it's too good. And what you need is this one-page memo from the White House saying, no, we're not taking it away from you. Well, and then at that point, people can start to put billions of dollars into this asset.
Sure, and I think we have someone at the SEC who is behind Bitcoin. At MIT, certainly that was the case. And the SEC has declared, as we all know, that Bitcoin is not a security. Now, Gary Gensler is talking pretty aggressively about everything else out there being a security. So I think this has elevated Bitcoin from a risk point of view, not to a lower risk. I shouldn't say elevated. It's actually lowered the risk that it's so clear Bitcoin is not a security, and everything else, at least in Chairman Gensler's eyes, is.
So the regulatory future is bright. Let's talk about economics. Look, I think economically, everything that we're seeing in the last 12 months inflation, war in Ukraine, Russian sanctions, the Canadian trucker crisis, CPI, unexpected PPI, and anxiety about how to manage a portfolio. All of these things have been bullish for Bitcoin, and anybody that thinks about it would realize that although they're unfortunate and unpleasant for the world, they have underscored to every mainstream objective observer the use case for a global non-sovereign store of value crypto asset like Bitcoin in a way that none of Michael Saylor's talking ever would.
Yes. Michael and I had a very spirited discussion yesterday afternoon about inflation as an issue, or is it ultimately going to go away? And we don't agree on everything, but one thing that I know and that we agree on is that if inflation is an issue, clearly Bitcoin is a great hedge against inflation. When we look at the deflationary impact of the various technologies around which we have centered our research, we think longer-term deflation and creative destruction associated with disruptive innovation, that's the bigger risk. And when you think about Bitcoin in those terms, you're thinking about a hedge against counterparty risk. So if we're going to have this debt deflationary bust that some still worry about out there, you've got Bitcoin as a hedge against that. So, it's as an investor, whenever I hear win-win, I usually don't believe it. But as it is very interesting to watch the equity markets or the investors in equity markets treating Bitcoin and other crypto assets like they are treating the rest of tech, which is not very well of late, and to see the holding behavior in the Bitcoin community. I think is it 70% of the Bitcoin outstanding, so roughly 13.5 million units of the 19 are in long-term holding hands, so more than 6 months. So the community gets it, and my fellow investors will get it with time, but in the meantime, it's going to be a very nice ride.
So I mean, that's a good segue to technology, because I think you're very enthusiastic about technology. I'm very enthusiastic about technology. And I think that technology is going to drive adoption of Bitcoin more aggressively in the coming 36 months, even than it has in the last 36 months. I guess I'd like to take a moment to give a shout out to Cash App and to Kraken, because I think both of those companies have done an enormous service for the Bitcoin community by integrating Lightning into their platforms, and I think they've thrown down the gauntlet. If I put away my macroeconomic hat and just think as a technologist, if you're a technical entrepreneur, if you're a venture capitalist, and if you're trying to figure out what's the next great thing, I think it has to involve Lightning in somehow. And if I look at the industry, I think every crypto exchange, if they're going to remain viable and competitive, they need to build Lightning into their exchange. And so I hope the people that run exchanges that don't have Lightning are listening to my presentation. I think that the lesson that's being shown to all of us is, if you want to be successful, then you adopt the Bitcoin standard. And the Bitcoin standard is you buy Bitcoin, you hold Bitcoin, you support the Bitcoin protocol, and then you support the layer 2 open source permissionless Lightning protocol, so that your company can trade and transact with all of the other hundreds, soon to be thousands, soon to be hundreds of thousands of companies in this entire asset economy at the speed of light, friction-free. Kathy, what do you think about technology trends that are going to impact Bitcoin?
Well, I agree with you on the Lightning Network. I was fascinated. We were studying the announcement this morning, and there's so much friction. There has been so much friction involved in the process that taking away some of that friction, whether it's direct deposit, you can put 2% of your paycheck into Bitcoin, or the idea that I don't need to know whether I'm on the Lightning Network or on the base layer. I can transact. I can become a part of this community and not have the friction. I think they're pulling a lot of the difficulty, complexity out. I've watched the number of Lightning channels. They're up to 84 to 90,000. That's nearly a triple over the last year. That's probably because of El Salvador. With this announcement, I think the number of channels is going to explode. The liquidity, we think, is going to go from, and I should say we, in the audience, we have Yassine Elmandra and Frank Downing, my secret weapons in terms of Bitcoin and everything crypto, for example. But we think that the liquidity, which has gone up tenfold in dollars, fourfold in Bitcoin over the last year, that's just a taste of what's going to happen now that Cash App is going to make this make it so much easier to use the Lightning Network. And I also say follow the developers. I think we're going to see an explosion of developers focused on the Lightning Network. And so now I think this has been the missing link in terms of the use case. Store of value, yes, it's always been there. Means of exchange and unit of account now have a much better opportunity for Bitcoin to dominate long term.
I didn't mention BitPay, but I got to say I was really excited this week when I read that BitPay is also supporting Lightning, and it made me think. We're in a year, right, 2022, where people are going to start to realize that not supporting Lightning is like not supporting the internet, right? If you don't support Bitcoin, you don't support sound economics or integrity. But if you don't support Lightning, it's just kind of like cutting yourself off from the internet. And it's so much so that you start to think that I don't want to do business with a company that doesn't get on board with Lightning. Like, I got to find another vendor. And I'll tell you another exciting thing about Lightning. I'm really excited about the speed and transaction velocity. I'm excited about the interoperability everywhere in the world. I'm also excited about what Lightning Labs announced this week with their Taro protocol, because if we can move USD stable coins at the speed of light over the Lightning Network, then I think the killer application in the world is going to be when 6 billion people, maybe 8 billion people, when your 3-year-old's got it, when 8 billion people run around with a mobile phone, with an Android or iOS app, and they've got a Lightning wallet, and that wallet has got some BTC in it as a store of value, and it's got some USD or Euro or CNY or whatever as a medium of exchange. And then you're going to see tens of trillions and then hundreds of trillions of dollars all moving on Lightning rails secured by the Bitcoin network. And then people are going to wake up and realize, holy crap, this stuff really is going to change the world.
You know, I often, when we're trying to impress upon investors how important this movement is, what I usually say is, okay, listen to this and listen to every word, because every word is important. Bitcoin is the first global. That's really important, as Michael said. Private. Now, it's open source, but there's no government involvement. So private. So first, global, private, digital, rules-based monetary system in the history of the world. It is a very big idea. Yeah.
Any form of money moving at any frequency instantly anywhere in the world over Bitcoin, right, is such a beautiful vision. So let's talk about capital markets. I just think we've made enormous progress. 18 months ago, MicroStrategy bought $250 million of Bitcoin. People thought we were crazy. You know, and everybody said, "Well, you bought it. You're not gonna buy any more. And when are you going to sell it?" You know, and then it promptly traded down, and we were down $50 million, and people were dancing on my grave, gleefully speculating about when the board of directors were going to fire me. And then we finished a Dutch auction, and we bought 175 million more, and I thought, well, I got it 20% cheaper. Why wouldn't I? And then people thought, well, you're going to stop. And then we didn't stop. And then Square, now Block, bought Bitcoin. And then Tesla bought Bitcoin. And we bought more Bitcoin. We're up to 6 billion Bitcoin. By the way, if you want to turn 250 million into 6 billion, buy Bitcoin. Don't buy gold. If I bought gold, I would have had $250 million worth of gold instead of $6 billion worth of Bitcoin. So when I say it's a lever and it's a ladder, I mean, yes, it's a ladder. So now at the end of, right about now, we've got 24 publicly traded miners. We got another dozen public companies. We've got $100 billion worth of assets flowing in this economy. Investment banks are doing deals, they're doing ATMs, they're doing convertible debt, we've done junk bonds, we've done all sorts of things. And I feel like the capital market's coming alive. From my perspective, Kathy, 24 months ago I went to Merrill Lynch and I said I want to buy Bitcoin. They laughed at me and said, not only will I not sell it to you, we're not allowed to talk about it or we get fired. Like, okay, well, then I wired like $175 million out of that bank and I went somewhere else. And, you know, I think the victory lap here is now my inbox has Bitcoin research from Merrill Lynch sent to me by the same broker. Like, we're covering it now. This is what we think. So every bulge bracket firm is starting to cover it. They're all grudging that they're going to start to trade it. It's coming. And you've got all these publicly traded companies that are leading the way. I'm interested in your perspective as an investor. How do you see the capital markets and their attitude toward Bitcoin today versus a year or 2 years ago?
Well, it's improved, but it's a long way from, you know, being fully accepted, embraced, and so forth. What we're seeing with Bitcoin and traditional institutional investors is the same thing ARK is seeing about all of our strategies, associated with all of our strategies. They're very volatile. That's scary for institutional investors. There's no index. They're not in my index. So, you know, this would be very risky to get involved. This is a new asset class, you know, and we don't even know what the regulations are. So we're seeing a lot of pushback still that way. But as many of you may know, in our Big Ideas 2022, which is at ark-invest.com, we have a price target in 2030 for Bitcoin of more than $1 million per Bitcoin. And yeah, see, even you can't believe it. I expected a big roaring no, but and if you go in and you'll see how we build that case, we see institutional investors, all we expect over the next 8 years is that 2.5%, roughly 2.5% of assets, institutional assets, are allocated to Bitcoin. So we don't need a lot. And if it's more than that, and that's how institutional investors work, they tiptoe in. In the 70s, it was real estate. In the 80s, it was emerging markets, 80s and 90s. And now I think it's going to be crypto starting with Bitcoin. And that's very important, starting with Bitcoin, because they understand what it is and what it's not. It's not a securities.
Nice. So we got to wrap it up here. But I leave you with two thoughts. One, whenever I meet with very powerful people, politicians, senators, Congress persons, governors, or whenever I meet with billionaires or CEOs, normally what they say to me is, my daughter or my son said you're a rock star and I have to meet you. Okay? And they're like, I had a guy come to my house. I met his son, and the next day the son brought his father, and his father could like buy the entire city of Miami. And he said, well, I don't know what's going on, but I know Bitcoin is really important, and my son says I got to sit down and listen. And so I orange-pilled him for 2 hours. And I'm not going to say who, because it's such a common story, but my point here is, every one of you knows someone. Go tell a CEO, go tell your father, go tell your mother, go tell somebody that Bitcoin's going to change the world and they should figure out more about it. Because the number one thing you can do is educate the world on Bitcoin and let people know they need to figure out Bitcoin. And every one of you does make a difference, because I would never get those meetings if it wasn't like someone that went and said, you got to pay attention. And my last point to you, you do not sell your Bitcoin. Thank you. Thank you.
Do not sell your Bitcoin. You just heard it from the Giga Chad CEO, Michael Saylor of MicroStrategy. Welcome back to the Marathon Desk here, hosted by Bitcoin Magazine live at the Bitcoin Conference. I'm Natalie Brunell. I'm joined by an amazing panel here on the Anchor Desk. I've traded mainstream news for Bitcoin news, right? We've got Dave Portnoy from Barstool Sports, Ben Askren, also known as Funky Boy, right? Former UFC fighter, and Alex McShane of Bitcoin Magazine. What an amazing conversation. A lot of talk about Lightning Network, Bitcoin as a powerful savings technology. Dave, I'll start with you, because you know what? They also talked about how 15 million coins are in strong hands, diamond hands, and you say you're diamond hands. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm never getting rid of mine. I've already sold them, like I said, once before. I bought it at 11,000. And then the Winklevosses, I guess you guys say orange pill, tried to orange pill me, and they did the reverse. They got me to sell it. Now I'm holding on forever. I'll probably die with them just to prove a point.
I thought it was Marty Bent that orange pilled you.
Marty Bent tried to, and he made no sense as well. And things were very, very complicated at the time. Like, I needed like a 3,000-digit code. He gave me a little thing that looked like a keychain. He's like, it's great, but if you lose it, you lose everything. So he did not orange pill me. He actually scared me away. He got me to buy it, and I still do own it. I just don't know where it is.
This is a great point. Bringing it back to Saylor talking about people giving other people their introduction. It takes a couple touch points to get it, because it's complicated stuff. Not simple starting out in the Bitcoin, but worthwhile if you learn how to buy and hold, right?
When did it change from needing like that key so you could just buy and sell like a normal human?
You can always do that. Obviously, it's like when I started in 2017, it's easier now, but holding it on an exchange or something is still kind of risky, obviously.
So what they were...
Is it?
I mean, I guess has there been a major centralized exchange hack? Not for a long time. Like 2016, 2017, it was all the time.
I think the risk
Recently,
is
almost none.
Not your keys, not your coins. So one of the things they're talking about is this.
That at all.
Yeah.
So the idea is if you don't have it at your house, then someone can take it from you. If it's on an exchange, they shut down your access. You can't access it from the exchange, right? If you have it on your Trezor or Ledger at home.
Yeah, but if you lose that.
No one can take it. You got your seed words, right?
You gotta back it up.
You don't have your seed words on your phone,
Have
do you?
you not been educated on cold versus hot storage yet?
Do you have your seed words on your phone, Dave?
No, but my current, I don't want to talk about my Bitcoins now, because I was going to hear I have Bitcoin if they're not in my house. You guys are laughing. I'm not laughing. Like, mine are just in an exchange.
Okay, so most people think like you don't want them there because it could be hacked or they could shut down your access. Whereas, okay, so mine, I have a multi-sig, not at my house, but I know where they are. No one can ever take those from me, right? They're mine. If I want to take them to Argentina, they're mine. Wherever I want to take them, they're mine. If I lose those things, I can just remember my seed words and I can re-access my wallets.
Gut reactions. How'd you feel about Michael Saylor today?
It was good. I don't want to say it was normal Michael Saylor, but there was like, I don't feel as though there's any, and I've listened to a lot of Michael Saylor, so I don't feel like there's any revolutionary points being made.
Yeah, I feel like we got a little tamer, a little more reserved, public-facing Saylor today. Not what we're used to in the podcast, but...
Yeah, I mean, one of my favorite quotes from today was, if you don't support Bitcoin, you don't support sound economics. If you don't support Lightning, you don't support the internet, because really that's what this is all about. This is a technology network. Maybe it's in its early stages, but it's growing very, very quickly. And it's not only a powerful savings technology, but now with Lightning, a payment rail that can transform.
And that's helping us bring Bitcoin from our store of value. Last year, we probably saw more of the medium of exchange, trade of money in El Salvador. And now we're looking at unit of account expanding on the Lightning Network. I really liked, he had 2 quotes. It's an ethical safe haven for any politician. We're going to see more and more politicians adopting Bitcoin just because of the single issue voters that are going to flock to their support.
Yeah, I really like that Kathy Wood also pointed out that if the U.S. wants to lose, it'll be against Bitcoin. So hopefully we're not going to see that. Dave, have you been bullish on, sort of U.S. lawmakers adopting Bitcoin? You live in 2 cities where the mayors are for Bitcoin.
Yeah, and it certainly galvanizes a younger audience, right? So for the mayor, Suarez has been great in Miami, and I think they realize it is a way to get a passionate base behind you. Not going to lie, I mean, I'm in the social media business, popular, like Bitcoin, and that community is a good community to have behind you. Anybody who's trying to get influence and support their cause.
Yeah, Ben,
I was going to say, if you do adopt that community, as Dave learned, don't sell.
Sometimes they can be sticks.
I know.
It can be,
Yeah, well, earlier Dave and I were talking about that. He thinks there are traders. I think there are a ton of hodlers in Bitcoin. I am a big hodler, but you still think there are people trading on them.
I think there's both.
Yeah.
And I think there's people who maybe say they hold all the time and maybe don't. Who knows?
All right. Well,
I just hold.
You are watching the Marathon Desk hosted by Bitcoin Magazine. By the way, make sure you're subscribed to this page, like this video so other people see it. We are live at the Bitcoin conference having discussions right in between the amazing panels with huge speakers. The next one is a keynote from Fode Diop. You don't want to miss it. And then come right back here, and we're going to be chatting about what was discussed, all here at the Bitcoin conference.
And don't forget rule number 1, educate someone on Bitcoin. Rule number 2, you do not sell your Bitcoin.
Do not sell your Bitcoin.
I know young Nick in the front row here is having a good time, always front and center. So, this is amazing. We're in the backstage before we come on. Everyone seems to be remarking, like, I can't believe this, all of this, the lights, the venue, this many people. And it's awesome. And I'm having a great time, and I hope you are too. But the shame almost is that there are certain parts of the world that don't have this. They don't have all this access to education. And they certainly don't have access to all the means to participate in this. There's so many parts of the world where, we might be engaging with Bitcoin because we see opportunity. We want to contribute to that hopeful future that we see. But a lot of people don't have access to the existing financial rails, so Bitcoin is literally a lifeline for them. They're able to access a global liquid market of value exchange without any intermediary. You don't need an ID, you don't need a bank account. All you have to do is join the network, and you can participate in this global phenomenon. And so our next speaker is going to talk about that, in particular, what's going on in Africa. So I'd like you all to help me give a warm welcome to software engineer and founder of the Bitcoin Education Academy, Mr. Fode Diop.
What about? Can you guys hear me? All right. Senegal is in the building. Thank you so much for having me here today. Last year, I was not too far from here in Wynwood. I was sitting in the crowd. So for me to be standing here today giving this keynote is nothing short but amazing. So thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. So I've been sitting in the back listening to all the talks. I didn't hear once somebody mention Africa somehow, some way. So I want to always talk about what I deeply care about, which is the African continent and Bitcoin, obviously. I call my talk Africa's Bitcoin moment because last year, while I was here, I heard Jack Mullers from Strike and the President Nayib Bukele mention legal tender in El Salvador. So I just took off, went to El Salvador because I wanted to see what would happen before Bitcoin and after Bitcoin adoption and see what I can learn to maybe apply in Senegal. And what I saw in El Salvador was so amazing because I have never seen so many people go to a country and wish nothing but best for that particular country. Bitcoiners are amazing, so I want to see how we can replicate this on the African continent, all right? So, I know Gladstein has talked about a lot about the franc CFA problem in West Africa. We have this currency that's shared by 15 countries, but which is unfortunately made by France in the south of France, and it's really messed up. So please check out Bitcoin Magazine's Monetary Colonialism or Gladstein's new book, Check Your Financial Privilege, or Reasons Magazine's documentary short piece on this particular problem. So to make things like a little bit clearer, let's basically compare two currencies in Africa. The one on the left called the CEDI is for Ghana, and the one on the right is called the franc CFA, and is shared by 15 countries in West Africa. What are the main differences? Well, if you look at the CEDI, it's made by Ghanaians, and it's for Ghanaians. The franc CFA was made by France, by the French people, for Africans in south of France. Ghana has been named 2 years ago, or 3 years ago, I think it's even higher now, amongst the top 10 fastest growing economies in 2019. None of the 15 countries that use the franc CFA in Africa rank in that particular list, and it's a shame. The CEDI is a floating currency, kind of. It's kind of like pegged to the dollar a little bit, but it's not too bad. But the franc CFA was pegged against the French franc back in the days, and then when they went to the euro, they pegged it against the euro. And that has consequences as well. Now, the CEDI could be devaluated technically, but only if it benefits the African people in Ghana. The French CFA could be devaluated by France, like for myself, when I got here in '94 to go to college, the money my dad saved for me got cut in half because overnight, France decided that they were going to devalue our money by 50%, which is a shame. So look at Ghana again, right? They have their foreign currencies and their gold in their own central bank. Senegal itself has to ship all the gold and pretty much all the money, or 50% of it, to France to basically manage, right? Ghana can trade with anybody that they want in the world. Senegal has to go through France first. They like it or not, turn it down, and then they can maybe sell it on the international market, which means that Ghana is technically sovereign economically. And my country, unfortunately, Senegal, is still dependent on France. We just celebrated our independence last Monday, April 4th, but I believe that today, in 2022, we are still under French imperialism, and it really sucks, actually, right? So the CEDI, that money benefits Ghana, obviously, and the Ghanaian people, and for us, the franc CFA, unfortunately, benefits like France, right? So, which currency would you rather have? Personally, I would rather have a currency that's controlled by Africans that benefits Africans, ultimately, right? But in the end, let's say Senegal wants to get off the CFA. Are they going to use the CEDI, this money from Ghana? I highly doubt it. We are a sovereign country. We don't want to basically use someone else's currency that might fluctuate or whatever else actually at the whim of another government. So for me, I believe actually Bitcoin is the answer in a lot of ways. Same as America here, we have the USA, United States of America. I can go to any state here, Oklahoma, Nevada, New York, whatever, it's the same people, use the same currency, I can trade with anybody, and I can do business with anybody. My wish is for a United States of Africa. That's actually my wish. But how do we get there, as a matter of fact, right? How are we going to make this money? Who are we going to trust to basically print this money for the continent? We can trust nobody. Because why? Because Bitcoin is pretty much trustless. We don't have to trust anybody in this world. So how do we basically make sure that we can trade, we can prosper, and we can help our kids? Africa will have the youngest population in the world by 1950. The average age is going to be 14 years old. 14 years old, right? But how are we going to get all the jobs to these kids and opportunities themselves? And especially if we have corruption and inflation and all these things. Ultimately, we need a currency that will basically unify us, right? Again, right? Unity. United States of Africa. How do we make it happen? Maybe Bitcoin might not be the ultimate answer, but it's technology that's working today you can possibly use to help us get to where we need to get to, all right? So, I want to announce our first Africa Bitcoin conference in Ghana this year. I chose Ghana. We're doing it, man. We're doing it. We're doing it. The idea is like, I'm from Senegal. I want to have this conference in Senegal. We are raising $1 million to throw this conference together. Why do I want to do it in another country? Because I have a problem with the currency that's in my own country, right? So until we figure out these questions and answer all these things that basically surround our currency that's controlled by the French, right? We cannot possibly have this event in Senegal. So therefore, we're going to Ghana, and I'm joined here by Farida. I don't know where she's at. She's in the crowd. But please see us later if you want to have more questions about it. And we'll have it first week of December. And ultimately, we got some sponsors already. Alex Gladstein. I see Carrie Lee here from Gemini. And of course, the Bitcoin Developers Academy, my own program. And we'll be announcing it for the first week of December. And if you want to check it out, please go to afrobitcoin.org or just scan this QR code and it will get you to the link. And hopefully we'll see you in Africa in December in Ghana. Thank you.
All right, we've been kicking it on the Marathon Desk hosted by Bitcoin Magazine here live at the Bitcoin Conference 2022 in Miami. I'm Natalie Brunell, host of the Coin Stories podcast, joined by awesome co-anchors, honestly. Dave Portnoy of Barstool Sports, Ben Askren, former UFC fighter, and Alex McShane of Bitcoin Magazine. Please subscribe to this page and like this video so other people see it. Let's get right to it. That was another great speaker, talking really about the separation, I think, of money and state. Dave, what did you think?
Well, I think that's super important. And I also think on the other side of it, what has always worried me a little bit about Bitcoin in the beginning is as there's a new class of wealth that the super rich will be like, hold on, you're not going to become more rich than I am. But I do like the separation. I think it's important.
So I first heard this guy speak at Oslo Freedom Forum, and he told this really interesting story of how he wanted to be a basketball player. So he moved to the U.S. He wanted to be like Michael Jordan. And so, I mean, we've got some athletes up here. Ben, what are your thoughts on just, you know, the idea that you don't have to come from a fancy background. You don't have to come from the elites. You don't have to be a politician. Bitcoin is for everybody.
Bitcoin is for everyone. I mean, the most important thing that I think he said, and I'm hoping he's factually correct historically, he said 1994 he came to America.
Yeah.
And that year his currency got devalued by 50%.
Yep.
I think that's something that a lot of Americans don't understand because we haven't experienced that, but it's happened in a lot of countries where, you know, their government-backed currency drops drastically, really, really quickly. And hey, I've been saving for 30 years, and now whatever I have is half or less. And obviously in countries like Venezuela, it's going faster than that. It's like every year, boom, down, down, down. And so now you have a currency which is separated from the government, and we're not seeing that with Bitcoin.
Yeah, and Michael Saylor, who spoke right before him, he always puts a spotlight on the fact that, you know, we see inflation here, but it's way worse in other countries.
Yes.
Alex, I know this is something you've talked about so much in your writings and on your show. What do you think about Bitcoin being that defense strategy against inflation?
I think it's a great store of value. I think that here at home, as he mentioned, check Alex Gladstein's new book, Check Your Financial
He's good.
Privilege, points out that here in America, we're not really savvy to this. We have control of the mint here, and we still feel this inflation, right? Americans are feeling these gas prices. Like, imagine if another country was controlling, you have to separate money from state. It hasn't always been like this. We have to return to a stateless, decentralized currency, and that's Bitcoin.
Alex, do you think that this is always going to be, smaller countries coming in first and smaller communities that are pushing the movement, or do we need the big institutions?
I think it's a combination. I think the people who understand Bitcoin the quickest are the ones who have a problem that Bitcoin solves. They're the one who identify it as a tool. And sometimes, people who are, very wealthy in US dollars, say, they might not get it at first because they just don't recognize, they have that privilege. They don't, they're not hurt as much by the inflation. They just,
Yeah. Dave, I know that you've been back and forth, right? You've been more bullish, more bearish. Now you're back in. Apparently the Winklevi told you something that made you sell all your Bitcoin. Can you share more about that?
Yeah, they said that Elon Musk was going to outer space and was going to mine gold from outer space, and it would rain plentiful down on Earth, making gold useless. And I was like, and for that reason, I'm out. I sold all of my Bitcoin. It was 11,000, and almost coincided directly with like the bull run. I don't know what it went to, like 30, 40,000. It escalated quickly. So
that was fascinating because, it was Marty Bent, who a lot of people in the space know that got you in, right? He was working
Marty
for
Bent
you?
was a shady character at Barstool. He was working for us.
Marty Bent worked for Barstool?
Under the guise of working for Barstool, and he had a corner Bitcoin office. His name at our office was Bitcoin Marty. We're like, what is he doing? He should be like writing blogs or doing sales, and he was doing Bitcoin. So, yeah, he actually got me my first Bitcoin on that Trezor, and I have no idea where it is or how much it's worth. He probably took it.
That's because you were asking questions about Trezor. That's the cold storage. That's where they won't confiscate it from you. All right, we are a minute away from the next panel. A lot of you guys know this speaker as well, Andrew Yang, who ran for president. Is there something that, Ben, you're looking for in this speech?
And Joe Jorgensen obviously was a libertarian nominee last year also. So probably talking about government and how Bitcoin interacts with it, I'm assuming.
Who's this guy, Alan Farrington, with the chipmunk?
I don't know him at all.
Alan Farrington's just released a book on Bitcoin.
Okay.
So.
Is he
Tell us more. What is it?
Anonymous?
Bitcoin is Venice. No, he'll be here. It's great.
Yeah, Bitcoin is the Renaissance. I love it.
I hate to wrap up without mentioning a Bitcoin conference that's going to be announced in Ghana. They're going to put $1 million up. This is for Senegalese, all the West African countries that are being screwed over by France and other nations who control their countries. This is their retaliation. They're going to put one of these in Ghana in 2022 in December.
I love it. And more nation state adoption, hopefully. You are watching the Marathon Desk hosted by Bitcoin Magazine live at the Bitcoin Conference. Please subscribe to this page, like this video. The next panel coming up, Overcoming Idea Inertia, moderated by David Zell. Check it out. We'll be right here waiting for you when you come back.
Nice.
There's been a lot of discussion and some exciting announcements today about nation-state adoption of Bitcoin, and certainly over the last few years, Bitcoin has become a political issue. However, that institution, the institution of politics, is notoriously resistant to new ideas. So here to discuss overcoming idea inertia, please help me welcome our next panelists, starting with Andrew Yang, entrepreneur, former presidential candidate, and founder of the Forward Party. Dr. Joe Jorgensen, president at People for Liberty, the presidential candidate for the Libertarian Party, and senior lecturer at Clemson University. Alan Farrington, author of the new book, Bitcoin is Venice. Glenn Greenwald, Pulitzer Prize-winning independent journalist. And David Zell, co-founder at Bitcoin Policy Institute and director of policy at BTC Inc.
Thank you. Thank you, brother. Love you too.
All right. What a panel we've got. This is going to be so exciting. So guys, each one of you has a unique relationship to what I like to call the duopoly of ideas. Most of the time in the United States, there's just two positions on something. Taking a step back, we used to have 3 media companies, and that was it: NBC, ABC, CBS. But even though we've had an explosion of growth in news companies, media channels, still, most media is only representative of a sliver of the possible ideas you could have about something. The left-right divide dominates the conversation, and it's hard to get ideas that don't fit squarely within one or the other into prominence. And I think every one of you on this panel has a unique relationship to this phenomenon. So I want to toss it to, first of all, Andrew and Joe, because you guys have utilized, in a fascinating way, third parties as a mechanism for taking ideas that were frankly unheard of and bringing them to national prominence. What are some of the lessons and ideas that you have about this concept?
Well, thanks, David. First, it shouldn't take someone running for president to have a new idea get out there, you know what I mean? It's not exactly an efficient mechanism. But I was talking to Glenn about the fact that people respond to Bitcoin very ideologically in a way that's not very rational or principled. And unfortunately, we're at a time in American life where as soon as someone says they're for it, then the other side says they're against it. We're getting more and more polarized. And that's a recipe for disaster in terms of innovation, in terms of having new approaches to our financial future. And it's one thing that I'm dedicating my time, as other people on the panel are, to trying to change that, where 62% of Americans don't feel like the duopoly is working and they want to move on from it, but they keep being told, no, you have no choice, it has to be an R or a D, even though the founding fathers were negative on partisanship. And you have a lot of people here, I have a feeling, who voted for Joe. Anyone here vote Libertarian?
Yay, thank you, thank you.
So there are so many perspectives that aren't accounted for in our media and our politics, and it does threaten to destroy us. But the people here give me hope, because I know you want a different approach that actually is about solving the problems of tomorrow instead of blaming someone for it.
Yeah.
Oh, and you know, you make a great point about the dichotomy. And real quickly, on the campaign trail, I was asked, okay, so who's right? Donald Trump, who says that kids should go back to school, or Joe Biden, who says they should stay home, or Donald Trump without masks, Joe Biden with. And I said, neither is right. It shouldn't be the president making these decisions. It should be up to parents, teachers, and students. And I'm finding that with Bitcoin, although unfortunately with Bitcoin, you've got both Democrats and Republicans against them, but against it. We'll see about that. You've got the Republicans who are saying, let's go back to the gold standard. You've got the Democrats who don't care about money at all, obviously by the way they're spending it. So when I was on the campaign trail, people would ask me, so do you want to go back to the gold standard? And my answer was, no, that's not far enough. Since when are monopolies any good? We've got to get rid of the monopoly and have free market money, just like we've got, you know, we should be having free market everything else when you go buy groceries or clothes, whatever. So there's a thinking out there that it's either this way, and there's no other way, or it's the two of them, the two of those parties against basically the citizens.
Yeah. So both of you have utilized third parties as a means of taking ideas and putting them into the mainstream. Now, Alan and Glenn, you guys have both leveraged independent media to do something pretty similar. I'd like to hear both of you kind of give your perspective on the role of independent media in overcoming this duopoly on ideas. And then, Alan, I'd like to hear from you how Bitcoin can play a role in this.
So yeah, when I first started getting interested in politics in terms of wanting to write about it and work in it, it was in the early aughts, and there was the emergence of what at the time seemed like something exciting, which was political blogs, what was called back then the blogosphere, a really cringy term. But at the time it was a little bit exciting, and the idea was it was a way of creating a separate kind of conversation, a different sort of conversation than the one that typically takes place within the corporate media. And for a while, it mildly succeeded. There was a different kind of discourse, a different way of talking about politics. And one of the things that you saw happen was soon as the corporate media saw the success of it, first they mocked it and ignored it, that standard cycle, and then they co-opted it. And they started having blogs and hire bloggers and kind of brought them into the mainstream discourse, and it kind of evaporated. And what you're seeing now is, in a way, a reemergence of that same ethos, but in a much more vibrant and potent and ultimately threatening way. And it's in part because the public has validly lost so much faith and trust in sources of corporate news, and has developed a strong antipathy for them as well, that almost anybody who says, I stand outside of that structure and have something different to say, gets a hearing increasingly. I think, you could just look at the fact that I think the single most influential media figure in the United States is not somebody who's ever on NBC News or in the New York Times, it's Joe Rogan. And where does he fit on the political spectrum? Is he on the left? Is he on the right? He's neither. He's nowhere. He's just curious and open, and that is increasingly what people want, and I find that very encouraging. And I think Bitcoin is a really good window for understanding this, because for a few years when Bitcoin first emerged, there was this almost like reflexive hostility toward it. I think it got kind of ghettoized as this like libertarian currency, with apologies to Joe, that instantly means if you're on the right or on the left, it's something you ought to ignore, or consider fringe or worthy of derision. And the more you kind of look, the more baffling that becomes, because there's so many political and cultural and social dimensions to Bitcoin. It answers so many of the problems that so many political factions can't find a solution to, that it's almost baffling why there's a reflexive hostility toward it. But I think the more these spaces open, where there's an independent way of talking about things, liberating ourselves from this duopoly, you see an increasing level of acceptance, or at least interest in new technologies like Bitcoin. I know that's been my trajectory. I thought it was just this weird thing for people who wanted to make money. And now I realize all my causes of free speech and privacy and undermining imperialism are all served, at least in part, if not fully, by this new technology. But I think the reflexive hostility toward it is sort of reflective of this idea of how powerful that mainstream structure is, where if they can take anything and declare it marginalized or outside of the duopoly, many people, including ones who don't think of themselves as being within that duopoly, kind of get conditioned to reject it. But I see the trend very much in the right direction.
They tried to do that to Joe Rogan too, you notice.
Yeah, they definitely did. Soon as anything becomes successful or potent, it becomes threatening, and that's what they try and do. And they're going to do that to Bitcoin the more interesting it becomes as well.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm very much a product of exactly this new ethos that Glenn is describing. There's no way that I would have really been able to achieve anything that I have in this community, or have ended up here, were it not for really just like Medium and Twitter, basically, which now we kind of take completely for granted. I mean, probably in part because of, as Glenn was describing, the extent to which they've been partially co-opted. But it's still amazing to me, like, what they really represent, right? I mean, Medium is blogging really is not Medium in particular, but blogging is self-publishing without a gatekeeper. And Twitter is then broadcasting of really anything, but predominantly in my case, of that publishing, again, without a gatekeeper. And I think the really amazing thing, something that this community can absolutely be proud of, is that I am in no way atypical. I mean, even earlier on in my journey, I was accelerating my own education and making connections by people who'd done exactly the same thing. I think, if anything, it's weird to sort of be an establishment figure in this. I don't know if anybody is. I don't know if that even means anything.
Yeah, I'd like to comment on what you said about how they're becoming increasingly against it. And obviously, since they're talking about coming up with their own, but it's online currency, completely different. They don't understand how it works. They are threatened by it. Look at the $1,400 checks that were sent out. Now, if we were under Bitcoin, could Biden have sent out $1,400 checks? No, because with Bitcoin, you don't make the money out of thin air. There's a finite amount. You can't just go out in the back and print a bunch. You couldn't print $1,400 worth of Bitcoin for everybody. And so they know that that's going to take their power away from them to come up with all the programs they're coming up with.
Yeah.
For the record, I quite like the $1,400 checks.
We know you do, Andrew. Alan, you were actually, I know we don't want to get too into politics or UBI, but you were talking to me earlier today about how you think there's actually maybe a little bit of synergy there.
Sure, yeah. I was wary of this maybe coming up because, I don't want to just... I don't want it to descend into a debate about UBI. I'm sure that's not why Andrew came here, what he thought he was expecting. But
oh, sure it is. I'm sure it is.
But I think, I don't obviously mean to speak for others, but I would be surprised if it were typical of Bitcoiners to be all that supportive of UBI. But the point I was making to you is that I myself am not, but I'm very sympathetic to the idea, I guess. I think because UBI, I see UBI as being a political response, and at least it is an effort at a political response, and it should be given, and Andrew in particular should be given credit for that, but to a problem which I see as ultimately economic and which ultimately Bitcoin also solves.
Right.
I just want to agree with Joe that I think there is a response coming due in Washington right now that I'm actually working hard to try and keep from being something that pushes a lot of this energy and innovation offshore. So we all saw there's an executive order and they're coming out with a regulatory regime. Buried in the text of that was a timeline. They said that they want to have the new rules out within 210 days of that announcement. So the next 6 months, there is going to be a whole new set of policies where Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies are concerned, and I think we have to make sure that they keep those rules on this side of sanity, is what I'd call it. And I'll say also, as an American, I want this innovation energy to stay right here in America if we can help it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you make a great point about this side of sanity, and that's what I'm hoping the Libertarian Party can do. A lot of people didn't realize this, young people, when I was on the campaign trail. I would ask them, did you realize that both Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton were against gay marriage just less than 10 years ago? And their response was no, and why would they do that? Politics. It wasn't the Democrats who brought about marriage equality. It wasn't the Democrats who brought about legalization of marijuana. It was the libertarian push. And so we hope to do the same thing for Bitcoin that we did for those, which is to talk about it in a way that it's people's rights, that we have the right to privacy, and that the government shouldn't be looking over every single thing we do.
Absolutely. So, without going back down the UBI rabbit hole.
Good, because, and by the way, I received an email saying that I was not to debate with Andrew Yang on our individual politics. So.
We can save that for after the panel.
Yes.
But I do want to talk to you, Andrew. Speaking of Joe Rogan, you've had, how many times have you been on that show?
I was on once during the presidential, but we've been in touch since then. We have a lot of friends in common, in particular Dave Chappelle, who tours with Joe sometimes.
Gotcha. Now, how do you see the sort of utilization of technology and independent media and maybe Bitcoin in doing the work that you're doing and sort of advancing an idea that doesn't fit within left or right?
I think the work that independent journalists like Glenn are doing, and Joe Rogan, you could put others in this camp, where they're intellectually open and curious and willing to be somewhat heterodox in their views, is what so many Americans and people around the world are hungering for, and they're being denied it by the corporate media, the gatekeepers, and the rest of it. And I certainly think that this ecosystem, I mean, look around you. Like, this is a media company, it's a community, it's awesome. This is the beginning of an alternative that I think is going to grow and grow because the mistrust of the establishment is also growing and growing by the numbers. And what's fascinating to me is that your trust in media actually is very, very partisan. So if you're a Democrat, the trust level is at 69%. Democrats still trust the media. And some of you are like scoffing at that because that seems really very high. Among Republicans, it's 15%. And then among independents, it's somewhere in between at 36%. But all those numbers are going down. So the question is what comes up to replace it? And I think that people like Glenn are doing their best to replace, and it's just going to keep on growing over time.
Just on that intersection between journalism and heterodox politics, I remember the first time I ever became interested in writing about WikiLeaks was back in 2008, before anyone who knew who they were, before they had done their big Iraq and Afghanistan document releases. And what made me interested in them was that there was a small little article in the New York Times that said that the U.S. Army had prepared a classified report declaring WikiLeaks an enemy of the state and was planning on how to destroy WikiLeaks. And ironically, that document got leaked to WikiLeaks, which being WikiLeaks, they immediately published it on their site. And I remember thinking, you know, any group that the U.S. Army considers to be that threatening is a group that I have a lot of interest in and I want to find out more about. And I've been thinking about that with Bitcoin as kind of a way in. Within the last year, one of the most vocal opponents of Bitcoin, one of the people most frequently warning of the dangers it poses to the prevailing order, is Hillary Clinton. She brings it up in interviews all the time now. And then recently, within the last 3 months, Donald Trump has been doing that as well, echoing a lot of the arguments that Hillary Clinton has for why you should regard Bitcoin as menacing, that it threatens the hegemony of the U.S. dollar, of U.S. power in the world, which of course it does. And on some level, I feel like, you know, one way to communicate this is to say, look, anything that both Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump regard as menacing to the prevailing order is something that if you don't instinctively support, you should at least be receptive to learning more about as a reason why it's so threatening to the prevailing order. And I think that the key to making more people interested in Bitcoin, again, not just as a currency, but as a political movement, as a movement of privacy that enables free speech, that can undermine this infinite credit system that is at the heart of U.S. imperialism and infinite war making and endless war, is to take it out of the left-right framework, which is not that hard to do. I did 2 interviews, video interviews. The first person I chose on purpose was someone who calls himself the blockchain socialist, who from a very traditional left-wing perspective argues why left-wing social movements should be really interested in Bitcoin. For obvious reasons, you need to be able to plan and organize without the state hearing and monitoring what it is you're doing. And then I interviewed Alex Gladstein, and he talks about the ability of Bitcoin to overthrow the dollar as the thing that enables and fuels imperialism. And then you look at what happened in Canada recently with the ability of the Trudeau government to just freeze the bank accounts with no due process of anybody participating in a protest the government dislikes. And Bitcoin offers the ability to solve so many of those problems, which both left and right and everything in between should be really excited about. And I think that is the solution to everything. It's exactly what Andrew said. The reason the media is collapsing in terms of trust and faith is because people are sick of those kind of, this duopoly being served. Everything has to be favorable to one party or the other. And the more you can bring things outside of that, I think the more of a hearing you're going to get. And that's why what's replacing the falling, collapsing corporate media is this part of the ecosystem of the media that is very aggressively and explicitly opposed to that.
Really interesting connection, by the way, with really interesting connection between WikiLeaks and Bitcoin. Perhaps an obvious one, I'm not sure, but is that they're both non-violent, right? So I'm sure there are many entities, let's say, that you would expect the likes of Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump and the wider US establishment to deem a threat in some, however ill-defined sense. But it's especially odd that these are basically just ideas. I mean, they're basically, actually, even stronger connection between the two. They're basically just truth. These people are scared of truth.
Yeah, and I'd like to also build on what you said. Of course, Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton are on the same side of this because they're both on the same side of big government and power. And that's where, Andrew, that's where we have, I think, the biggest problem with third parties. And I think one of the problems that third parties have, besides the deck being stacked against us, is third parties are principled in their ideas. Now, I don't always agree with the principles. Like, for instance, I'm huge on the environment. However, I think the Green Party's suggestions are going to hurt the environment, not help it. But, Green Party, all about the environment. Libertarian, let's give people the freedom to do what they want. Andrew, I know yours is going to be very principled. I know it's new. Constitution Party, whatever. So we have ideas that we're trying to put out there to the people. But what the Democrats and Republicans do, they're like chameleons. And it's whatever the people want them to be, they will be and they will say. And I told people on the campaign trail, I understand why people voted for Donald Trump, because he comes along, I'm a businessman, I know how to balance a budget, cut spending. And yet he gives us bigger government than Barack Obama. So basically, they just read people and give us what they want. And so what we've got to do is we've got to, I hate to say it, but I don't want to say start acting like Democrats and Republicans, but what we need to do is we need to start listening to voters more and showing how, yes, we can solve your problems. Yes, we have the answer, rather than going around putting our ideas first. We need to put the voters first, not our ideas, not our philosophies, not our principles.
Yeah. Well, how many of you all would vote for a third-party candidate if you had the chance, either independent, libertarian, or otherwise?
There you go.
Well, they all had the chance last year, or last time.
Well, I'm sure.
I was on the ballot in all 50 states, and and can I mention real quick? A friend of mine said, "Yeah, a friend of mine went to vote, comes out of the ballot voting booth, and says, yeah, there was Trump and Biden, and then some named Joe Jorgensen. Who's he?" So the problem, again, the media, they didn't even know I was on the ballot. But yes.
Yeah, the structural limits, you weren't in the debates and that kind of thing.
Oh, yeah, that's the point I'm making, is that if you had that choice presented to you, you would take it. If Joe had been up there on the debate stage with Joe Biden and, I had to say his last name, Joe Biden and Donald Trump, a lot of Americans would have looked at Joe Jorgensen and said, sign me up. Because the fact is, we might be in for a Trump-Biden rematch in 24, and over 50% of Americans don't want either of those choices. And so if you had a third choice and it was presented to you and it was competitive and it was meaningful, that third choice becomes very, very popular very, very quickly by the numbers. It's one reason why they're so eager to deny you that choice. So I want to applaud Joe and the Libertarian Party for presenting that choice to the American people, and I wish you got your, you wish you were on that debate stage and got your just due.
So I want to take a step back here. I'm going to go out on a limb and assume that each one of you have been called crazy. When you left the Democratic Party and started the Forward Party.
Oh, I was called crazy when I ran for president. But
yeah, true. In the Democratic Party.
Oh, yeah. It happened earlier than that, David.
So, yeah, I think that's an experience that all of you probably have. And I think that's an experience that all of you have in the audience. Like, most Bitcoiners have dealt with the experience of being looked at like they have three heads. When people talk about, I'm going to a Bitcoin conference, I own Bitcoin. People come after you. They call you an idiot. They say you're falling for a Ponzi scheme. They try to argue with you and explain to you why you're wrong. There are real risks, both material and social, in stepping out on a limb in advocacy or support of something new. And all of you have taken material risks. You left, The Guardian. You left a cushy, cool job where you were crushing it to go try to change politics. And, you were in legacy finance, and now you're here on stage. So I want to hear from each of you about the thought process of, wouldn't it just be easier to just shut up and not say anything?
No.
What motivates you to kind of challenge this so deeply ingrained duopoly when, as you put it, Joe, the deck is really stacked against you?
I read Animal Farm in 5th grade, and that changed me for life. When I learned some people are more equal than others, and then when I saw it happening in real life. And again, I was called crazy in the 70s for thinking that marijuana should be legal. I was called crazy in the 70s for thinking gays should have the right to marry each other. So absolutely. But no, I don't want to live in a world where some are more equal than others. And a lot of people have asked me, oh, you're a woman, do you have any women models that you're... No, I'm just mad. I'm just mad at the injustice. And I think also that that's where we fall short, is if you look at the movements that have gained traction, such as Black Lives Matter or the Me Too, they're talking about an injustice. And I think that we don't do that enough. But that's what keeps me going, and I feel very strongly about it.
Andrew? My parents immigrated to the U.S., and I always had this deep sense of gratitude for their decision and for the opportunities that I had in this country. And I felt like our country's not doing well. Our country's really not doing very well. Most of you probably realize that. And so when I saw, it's one reason you're here, baby. In 2017, when I started telling my friends and family, hey, I'm going to run for president, their response was, of?
Mine too, mine too.
You know what I mean? Like, that's, but I looked at it and said, I genuinely think I can help my country understand what's happening to it in terms of the fourth industrial revolution and the transformation of our way of life. And if that's your upside, that you can advance the condition of your society and help maybe improve millions of lives. And then the downsides were time away from my family, opportunity costs, and potential public ridicule or humiliation. It seems like a pretty easy decision, at least to me. You know what I mean? Like, if you can help millions of people, you have to take that.
And may I add quickly, 3 of my grandparents are immigrants, and my grandmother used to tell me stories about the old country, where they took away all your money, and it didn't matter how hard you worked, everybody ended up the same. So again, I grew up with a real love of what our country started as.
I think this animates Joe too. This is my fucking country. I'm not going to let it go down the tubes without a fight. You know what I mean? Like, I love this country.
Wow. David, I want to go next because I want to say something extremely dark that I don't want to end on, so Glenn can then say something positive. That it's also nicely differentiated from these positive visions. What motivates me is that I feel like I have a very strong sense of what will happen if we don't win, right? Over the course of my lifetime, digital surveillance has gone from negligible to absolutely omnipresent, as Glenn will know better than almost anybody. Obviously, everybody here can talk at length and be called crazy by their friends about inflation, about fractional reserve and
though the higher Bitcoin trades, I think people see you as less crazy over time.
That's true. Yeah, you do eventually get proven right. And CBDCs are coming. It's which I find quite amusing because I honestly have never even seen a coherent definition of what that actually means. It's more like an aspiration. It's a particularly dystopian aspiration, but there's an enormous amount of weight behind it. It will eventually happen. We will need Bitcoin as an alternative. I am motivated by contributing however little to ensuring that it exists as an alternative.
Yeah.
Say something happy.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm surprised that you're so sure that I'm not going to offer darkness. I'm not really accustomed to people expecting that of me. But I'll try. You know, one of the formative experiences I had on this question of why do you take risks and why are you willing to kind of put yourself out there in a way that isn't always popular is when I met Edward Snowden in 2013 in Hong Kong. I had been talking to him for several months online, developing a journalist-source relationship with him, and he was extremely careful for obvious reasons that he knew at the time and most of us didn't, that the internet is a place where when you speak, there are lots of ears that you're not aware of that are hearing what you're saying. And so he was very careful, which meant I didn't really know anything about him. I didn't know who he was. I didn't know where he worked. I didn't know how old he was. I made him prove that he actually did have extremely sensitive documents, and he proved that to me, which is why I got on a plane and flew halfway across the world to Hong Kong to meet him, but I didn't know much else about him. And when I met him, I had this mental image in my head of who he was. I thought he was like this very kind of old, ragged, national security guy in his 60s who had seen it all and just got to the point where he couldn't take it anymore, was willing to go to prison. And when he walked up to me, and my colleague Laura Poitras in that Hong Kong hotel, he was 29 at the time, but he looked like a kid, out of a video store, 22, 23. And I was shocked, and I spent that whole first day trying to understand why would somebody like this, who has his whole life ahead of him, who had a very good job for Booz Allen, making a lot of money, had a girlfriend who loved him, a family that was supportive. He wasn't the kind of vintage case of this like disgruntled, alienated whistleblower. Quite the contrary. Why would somebody like that be willing to risk their entire life? I mean, our working assumption was 95% likely he was going to end up in an American prison for the rest of his life. By sheer luck, he didn't, but that was the likely outcome. And he ultimately said to me, we know we're all going to die, and the only question really is, how are we going to live? And to hear somebody in that stage of their life who wasn't just saying it but was living it was a really profound experience for me. And one of the things that happened as a result of that work is it got a lot of positive attention. It won a Pulitzer. There was a film about it that won an Oscar. My life changed in a lot of ways that I never expected. A lot of doors flew open. There's a huge incentive system that's designed to kind of co-opt you. They offer you a lot of money to go to events. You go at these events, you're supposed to sit in cocktail parties with people that you've accused of being war criminals, you believe are war criminals. And, suddenly all of these incentives are designed to lure you out of this kind of dissident space into a space where you're much less threatening. And I felt myself falling into that hole and realized that, if I ever fell into that hole, everything that I did would just become a job. I would now become part of this system I regard as decadent and toxic and destructive. And so I think probably everybody who stays outside on purpose has to at some point make the choice that you look at this system, the evil it produces, and you really do have two choices. You can either be supportive of or complicit with it, or devote yourself to trying to undermine and subvert it. And, when people ask me who's the happiest person I know, I always say it's Edward Snowden, even though he's in exile in a country he never chose to be in for 8 years and probably for the rest of his life, because every day that he puts his head on a pillow to sleep, he knows that when faced with the choice of who he wanted to be and what he was going to do, he made the right choice. And there's just no substitute for that in terms of happiness. So I think that's a really good motivation scheme.
I wouldn't be so pessimistic about the rest of his life. If we elect Joe, we can get him back.
Or Andrew. I think Andrew, too, is going to offer the pardon.
On the campaign trail, I said I would pardon him, Julian Assange, Ross Ulbricht. I went through the list every chance I got, yes.
That's a good question. Yeah, Andrew, if you were president, would you support the pardon of Ross Ulbricht?
Of Ross Ulbricht?
Yeah.
No, all I will say is that there's a history of presidential pardons being given out as political favors in like the last day in office, and I think we should be looking at pardoning people who acted out of principle or service at great personal cost.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, as we wrap down, I want to thank each of you for being on the panel. Thank each of you for taking the risks that you just described in fighting against the duopoly, against the mainstream. Even if we don't all agree, I think it's really, really good that we have people like you and people like everyone in this audience who are willing to take a stand for something that the rest of the world calls them crazy for. So I appreciate it. Thank you guys so, so much. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks.
Welcome back to the Marathon Desk, hosted by Bitcoin Magazine, here live at the Bitcoin Conference 2022. I'm Natalie Brunell, joined by some amazing co-anchors, Dave Portnoy, Ben Askren, Alex McShane. And that was a really interesting panel for me because I come from the world of mainstream news. They talked about media narratives and politics, and I gotta admit, I've been jaded when it comes to politics because I've interviewed campaign, elected official after elected official or someone who wants to run, and all of them make these promises and they never come true and the system gets worse. So I want to talk to you guys about that because some of the points were raised. Alex, what are your thoughts on mainstream narratives in Bitcoin?
In terms of mainstream narratives in Bitcoin, I think vote with your Bitcoin. These politicians are going to adopt it, bring it in to boost their platforms. That's great. Some of them, I think, time will tell, right? Whether they're a net positive for the ecosystem or whether they turn their backs on Bitcoin if the price depreciates. So I would just say vote with your Bitcoin first. Vote with your capital first, and then turn to leaders in the space, right? Bitcoin doesn't have any leaders. It'll eat up all of these people.
Is it just me that I'm just super skeptical when it comes to politicians on either side? Like,
No,
Dave,
they're
what are your
trash.
thoughts?
Politicians are trash.
Agreed,
Like
100%.
one maybe out of 1 million have like good intentions, but left, right, they all stink. They all stink.
I know. I mean, I get really excited when one comes out and they're clearly orange pilled, right? And they seem to get it, or they're doing their homework and they say that they're going to support Bitcoin. But I'm always skeptical because their actions speak louder than their words. Like we saw with Mayor Eric Adams, right? He came out, he said it was for Bitcoin, but not Bitcoin mining. It was like, well, do you get it?
Second. You don't
Yeah.
get it.
Right? Ben,
And the
what are
fact
your
of the
thoughts?
matter is to rise to a certain level where you get to an elected, you're just a puppet a lot of times for other interests. But yeah, politicians stink.
No, I think he made a great point. Whether it's the media or whether it's a politician, when you start getting to certain levels, people in power don't want you to get power, right? So they say, "Come with me. Here's what I'm going to do," or else, right? Or else you're not going to take that next step up. And so I think that's like we see that happen all the time.
Yeah, I would say my two takeaways are, one, I mean, the biggest thing you're seeing, even with the negative news about Bitcoin, is you're seeing people lend legitimacy just by interest, right?
Yeah.
But the second thing you're going to see is misinformation and attacks for people who are close to the money printer. For them, Bitcoin is not in their best interest, right? So you're going to get people like Glenn Greenwald, Andrew Yang, Joe Jorgensen, people who have been disaffected from that system, turn to Bitcoin as a safe haven.
Yeah, well, that happened to me because I didn't like how politics and media seem to be in bed together, and I didn't like it. So I came out because Bitcoin fixes that. Look, the next speaker is literally the guy who changed my life. He's probably the reason I'm up here. I read the Bitcoin Standard in 2019, went down the rabbit hole, and now I'm a Bitcoin anchor, I guess. All right. So keynote speaker next, Saifedean Ammous, author of the Bitcoin Standard, pretty much the Bible for Bitcoin. If you haven't read it, you have to. His speech is called, "Is Fiat Money Worth It?" I think I know the answer, right? And make sure to come back here to the Marathon Desk hosted by Bitcoin Magazine for more commentary. We're going to discuss the panelists. Make sure to subscribe to this page and like this video for more. And check out Safe's speech.
Nice.
I hope you guys have been enjoying the morning session. Check, check. There we go. I hope you guys have been enjoying the morning session. Here to close it out before a short intermission is someone that I think we probably all owe a debt of gratitude to for helping us understand the history of money, fiat money, and why Bitcoin is ascending as the future dominant global monetary standard. Please help me in welcoming to the stage the author of the new book, The Fiat Standard, and the classic, The Bitcoin Standard, Mr. Saifedean Ammous.
Thanks, my man. Cheers, thank you, thank you. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you so much for being here for my talk. We always hear fiat people complain about the high cost of Bitcoin. Bitcoin takes up too much electricity. Well, what about the cost of fiat? Not a lot of people ask that question because they're just used to it. They think it's just costless, it's provided by government. But it does have a cost. Now, to be clear, the cost of fiat is not like the cost of Bitcoin. It's not in terms of its electricity where you really find the true cost of fiat. It's true that there's a lot of electricity that's being spent to operate the fiat system, but all of that, really, in terms of the consequences of fiat, when you compare the cost of running it to the cost of the consequences of running it, the cost of the electricity to run it really rounds down to zero. The costs of fiat are elsewhere. They are in the catastrophes that it creates for its users. So, the first obvious and most important cost of fiat is inflation. Annually, fiat money experiences a dilution of about 14%. That's the average over the past 60 years. If you look at the data from 1960 until today, it goes up roughly around 14% per year in terms of the total market supply. So the average fiat user experiences a dilution of their stake in fiat money by 14% per year. The total global money supply is roughly $100 trillion. So we're losing roughly the market value of around $14 trillion a year in current terms, which is, since global wealth is $400 trillion, this is 3.5% of global wealth. So the cost of fiat is roughly 3.5% of all human wealth. And that goes to finance governments and wars and monopoly bankers. But not only is this a very high cost, I think the point that many people miss is that the cost of inflation is a very highly regressive tax. The rich are able to protect themselves by buying hard assets which benefit from inflation. The poor are the ones who hold the majority of their wealth in either cash or basic saving accounts. Those are the people who can't afford to buy a lot of real estate or hard assets or get into the stock market. They don't have financial access. They're the ones who host most of their wealth in cash balances, and they're the ones who suffer the most from this. And now, unsurprisingly, all the people in the fiat world who are paid by fiat money and are constantly going on about inequality fail to mention how this exacerbates inequality all over the world. But of course, it doesn't just stop there. Now, you could say, well, this is a lot of money, but it goes to finance government, and government does good things, right? No, government doesn't really do good things with the money that it gets. Government is basically just central planning. Government distorts and destroys everything it touches. There's nothing that humanity can't provide voluntarily. Anything that requires a gun to be put to people's head in order for it to be provided likely isn't needed, or it would be provided much better if people didn't have guns in their heads. So the world would be better off if the people who benefit from fiat just took their money and bought gold with it and got rich from it. But unfortunately, the real cost is that they actually spend it, and they try and do good things with it, but the consequences are usually terrible. So the value of your money is declining, so your ability to buy essentials is declining, and government has the purchasing power that it takes from you, which it spends on convincing you that you should give up on the essentials that you need to live a decent life, and that is actually for the good of the earth and for your health. And so all of the ancestors' food that all of your ancestors have eaten all throughout history is now considered bad for you. You need to eat industrial waste, because that's the correct way that fiat finance scientists conclude. And similarly, we see the distortion in the energy market, where they're trying to force people to use pre-industrial technologies. We no longer have a Concorde, and we're being primed to think with fiat money. You know, fiat scientists are telling us that windmills, a 6th century technology, is what is going to be needed for the future. This is just inflation cover-up. This is inflation laundering. They're trying to make you live like a peasant and think that that's better because, you know, it saves the planet or saves the oceans from boiling or whatever. And it doesn't stop there. Economic distortions caused by fiat are extensive. The fact that our money is devaluing roughly by about 14% per year means it's very hard for people to save for their future. And if they can't save for their future, they start discounting the future more. The future becomes more uncertain. And so we see time preference rises. And this is a topic I discuss in both my books, the Bitcoin Standard and the Fiat Standard. The degree to which we discount the future declines or increases. Our discounting of the future declines. And the valuation we attach to the future declines, the less our money is able to save its value and hold on to its value into the future. We discount the future more. And so we see this reflected in all kinds of ways in which people behave, not just financially and economically, but in all kinds of ways. And similarly, the central planning of the money supply by governments creates business cycles. The entire business cycle is caused by the manipulation of interest rates. And of course, it's destroying capital. It makes people invest in negative yielding businesses, businesses that yield a negative return in real terms, because they seem to be yielding a positive return in nominal terms, and that's better than holding on to fiat. And then finally, this major economic distortion is that we have a global system of partial barter. You can't just buy things with money internationally. You have to buy different currencies for different countries, which is highly inconvenient. And the fourth and the most disastrous cost of fiat is in the cost of conflicts it creates. Under hard money, under money that is not controlled by government, governments could only fight until they ran out of their own money. Under fiat, governments can fight until their entire population runs out of wealth saved in money. So with fiat money, governments can continue to fight until they destroy the entire wealth of their society. It's not just their wealth. And that contributed to making wars under the fiat standard far longer and far more deadly. And it contributed to making governments far more deadly and far more powerful. Governments murdered 169 million people in the fiat century. They're by far the most dangerous thing on the world, by far, more dangerous than any animal or natural disaster. And all the greatest tyrants, all the biggest tyrants in history ran on fiat money because it allowed them to finance doing all kinds of insane and criminal nonsense. And another point that is very important about fiat is not just that it finances war, it also raises the stakes of war enormously. It makes the reward for winning war much bigger, both domestically and internationally. The people who get to control the money supply get to control a lot, and so the stake of war under a fiat standard becomes much, much higher. So this is how we can understand the cost of fiat. It's not in the electricity that it uses. And this is why we can understand why Bitcoin consumes a lot of electricity. It's a far more advanced technological way of performing the functions of money that leaves it immune to interference by the government and therefore prevents us from paying all the heavy costs of fiat that come from government control of money. And so in the same way that washing machines consume more electricity than washing with your hands, everybody who has a chance to buy a washing machine chooses to buy one because it's far more convenient. And in the same way that cars consume more energy than walking or bicycles, a lot of people prefer to have cars because they're far more mobile. You cross the ocean with an airplane because it's a much better technology for doing it than if you try to do it with a kayak in the sea, even though the kayak consumes a lot less energy. This is how life improves. This is how our quality of life improves. We expend more energy on making things without having to rely on human fallibility. We increase the productivity of our machines, increasing our productivity, allowing us to perform these jobs much more reliably and with far less negative downsides and consequences. That's why we have computers, that's why we have pipes. And Bitcoin is just another machine like these machines. Yes, it consumes a lot more electricity because it saves on a lot of other very, very, very high costs. That is basically the topic of my latest book, The Fiat Standard, which you can pick up in the bazaar, in the Bitcoin bazaar in the back area over there. I'm going to be selling copies of the book and signing them. And also you can take a course on my website that starts this week on saifedean.com based on the Fiat Standard. Thank you very much.
Read the Fiat Standard and don't sell your Bitcoin. Those are my two takeaways from Saifedean Ammous, author of the Bitcoin and Fiat Standard. We are here on the Marathon Desk, hosted by Bitcoin Magazine, live at the Bitcoin conference in Miami. I'm Natalie Brunell. This is Dave Portnoy, Ben Askren, Alex McShane. What an amazing speech. I mentioned earlier, this guy got me into Bitcoin, converted me to Bitcoin. Now I have a career in Bitcoin. Dave, what did you think of his talk?
It was interesting. I mean, all the Bitcoin is very pro-Bitcoin, and I'll have to read the book. I haven't read the book.
You haven't read Bitcoin or Fiat Standard?
I will say it's the first time you guys clapped after a presentation.
Yeah. Well, I will say someone tried to come up and shitcoin Dave, and he didn't allow it. So he's becoming more of a Bitcoin maxi.
Not only
I
did
think
it try
live.
to shitcoin me, it was a shitcoin that has cost me 40 grand.
That's
so
right.
it wasn't just any shitcoin; it was my shitcoin.
He's not lying. I saw his account. It's gone down heavily from a certain altcoin I won't mention.
What's 40 grand to 2 grand?
As Saifedean would say, those are high time preference investments, right? He told us, he told us with the Bitcoin Standard, we got to get away from these. taught us about low time preference money. In the fiat standards, he's introducing low time preference lifestyles, right? Got to get your health right. Got to get your facts right. Got to invest time in yourself.
I think the most important thing that he said, and Natalie, you said it was Jason Lowry, but the actual cost of war.
Kinetic war.
Kinetic war, where they could just print money. They could do as much war as they want.
Yeah.
Not like hundreds of years ago when they had to print bonds to fund wars, and then people were like, wait, what's this shit I'm paying for? I don't want to go to Afghanistan or wherever.
Yeah.
You know, like, let's not pay for it. How about that?
He dropped some scary statistics on us,
Yes.
right? Like 169 million people killed under
Yeah.
fiat. All of these leaders like Hitler that were empowered by fiat and corruption. And then he pointed out also 14% inflation. It's not the CPI like they tell us, right?
Yeah, and I think
CPI is a lie.
I think CPI is a lie. I think the takeaway there is also just these fiat governments have been so pervasive that none of us even knew growing up that we had an option, right? Fiat means by decree. This money has been forced upon us. You see what it does. And in response, we're taking Bitcoin and we're going to have a user-activated soft fork of the legacy financial system.
Yeah, and
That's what I like. You know, he points out the fact that we're coerced into fiat,
Yeah.
whereas Bitcoin, we can like opt out onto this life raft pretty much, because you're right. Most people save in cash. My family, immigrant background, like they fled communism. They only ever saved in cash, and they have suffered because of it. They lost everything in the financial crash because they didn't know how to, you know, outgame the system, and the system's so broken. And he points out how, you know, Bitcoin through sound, hard money can hopefully fix that. But how many of you knew what hard, sound money was before you learned about Bitcoin?
Not me.
Yeah, well, that's why that stat. It's like Bitcoin's only been around for so long, so every war was financed on, you know, fiat.
Yeah, and you were mentioning, I mean, as your business grew, right, you had to figure out places to put your money so that you could see the value in the future, right?
100%. You want to be safe. I mean, I have Bitcoin, I have normal money, I have real estate. So at this point, I mean, I don't know. You guys may be all Bitcoin. I wouldn't recommend that either.
I mean, what are you guys looking forward to the rest of the conference? I know this is your first. This is probably what? How many for you guys?
This is my first also. I wanted
really?
from last year to make it. I want Jack Mallers. Jack Mallers better announce something freaking good.
We're looking at you for Apple.
Shout out Parabolic Guy, too scared to come, I heard.
Parabolic Guy was too scared to show up.
Yeah, sad.
Jack may or may not have previewed a little bit of his big announcement on my podcast, and it's awesome. He,
Well,
by
what
the way,
is
like
it, Natalie? Give us the juice.
I can't say. You're gonna have to tune in. You're gonna have to watch the Marathon Desk. By the way, subscribe to this channel, like this video so other people see it. Join us in Miami next year. Why are you sitting at home? There's like a huge crowd behind these cameras. It's amazing. And yeah, thanks so much for watching. By the way, I've been joined by Dave Portnoy, Ben Askren, Alex McShane, and we're going to take an intermission, but we're going to go to the Bitcoin mining stage. So check that out, and we'll be back here on the Marathon Live Desk in an hour. So come back. So many Bitcoin topics, so many cool people, way cooler than me, and we'll be back.
Sectors, too many going into one region, and a lot of it's FUD, right? It's education again. I think there's going to be a very strong narrative that, ironically, so much of it was in China previously, and everyone said China controlled Bitcoin. Clearly they didn't, right? People are going to start saying the US controls Bitcoin, but the US operates very differently from China, right? It's a republic. All the states manage themselves very independently and differently. I think a great analogy and example is we have medicinal marijuana use or even marijuana legalization that's still being passed through the federal level. But at the state level, you have plenty of states have already legalized it, right? So it's actually very decentralized by nature, just from the individual provinces or the states that Bitcoin mining is gravitating to.
Well, just to add on that, actually, I think the supply chain issue is also very related to the geopolitical risk. So we suffer that a lot because we are migrating the hash rating to US, and we need to like ship the miners here, and also sometimes we ship the containers here, like the sea shipping takes forever, and then the construction in the US, they're purchasing lots of components from China. You have to wait for a long time. So the geopolitical risk actually is also causing some constraint on the supply chain.
I think what Sam mentioned, there's this trend that I see on Twitter. They talk about the movement of deglobalization. Everybody in this room, we grew up in an era where everything became globalized and the internet made this world even more globalized. But I think it started during the Trump era where the deglobalization movement happened, where people are now starting to look inward, the whole Russia and Ukraine thing, China just putting its virtual walls. We're seeing a new era of deglobalization, and that affects what Sam was talking about with respect to the supply chain.
Right. I think the strongest example is the U.S.-China trade war tariffs, right?
There's another great example of deglobalization.
Yeah, it's quite costly when it's an extra 25% price tag from importing anything from China. So.
Right.
Yeah.
And that affects mining rig market?
Absolutely. And the market, I think, is efficient. It's just, it takes time, right? A lot of the manufacturing from China has gravitated now towards Southeast Asia. You have manufacturing in Malaysia and Thailand and other regions. And I think over time, there's going to be manufacturing here in North America as well.
And so with the manufacturing part, we recently had the news of Intel coming out with their ASIC. Does that help with diversification, with decentralization, with regards to, I know TSMC has been a major fab?
So yeah, I think I can take a stab at it first. I'll say that I think it's terrific. New competitors and new entrants in the space leads to more competitive offerings, right? So I think it's terrific. I think there's an uphill battle for Intel because the incumbents typically have a very long advantage and lead as far as the research technology and as well as kind of proven model and units that are kind of already energized on shelves. Oftentimes you'll see specs and overpromises when people are releasing a new product. So I really would love to kind of work closely with Intel, kind of get them integrated and kind of up to speed on kind of the space and the nature of our industry because it's very, very competitive, right? We were gifted not only kind of the opportunity to bring a lot of mining to North America with the China ban, but we were also gifted with 50, 60% discount on Bitcoin mining, right? When half the competition drops off, the mining economics are much, much, much looser, right? So is their offering going to be cost competitive, not just efficient enough, right? So I think that's going to be interesting to see how it plays out.
Any other thoughts on Intel?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think the difference between the ASIC market today and where we were in 2013, 14 is when you built an ASIC back then and there were many, many ASIC manufacturers looking to raise 20 million to do a tape out and all the rest of it, is you built a machine and it would last for 1 year. Right. Because the next generation would come out, it would be an order of magnitude more powerful. And so we've had a period of, one manufacturer dominating and producing fabulous equipment, and that's great. But because the hardware lasts longer now, there's an opportunity for large manufacturers, especially those that are investing in new foundries in the US, to challenge that. I think we might see margins compressed. But going back to the geopolitical side, we only have to look at what happened in China, what happened in Kazakhstan recently, to show how resilient the network is. It's the old chestnut, the network interprets, censorship as damage and routes around it. So Bitcoin as a network is resilient to the largest country of mining, banning it. Everybody went to another country and then exited that. Some of those guys went to Russia and then regretted it. So we can be confident that the network is resilient against really any nation state deciding that they don't like it.
With regards to the centralization of the manufacturing part, how big is the secondary market relative to the primary market for rigs? Because that contributes to decentralization as well.
Well, I think there is definitely a spot market, but you need to have certain abilities to really access it. A lot of the spot market is actually done in China. In fact, one of the secret sauces for Bit Digital is that we have a team in China where we're very well connected there and we can penetrate that spot market, which is actually quite interesting given the China ban. And so if you have that linguistic ability and the know-how and the relationships, the spot market in China is pretty interesting, and it's been a great situation for us. If you think about it, when you buy from the manufacturers, you have to wait 6 months, if that. Spot market, possession immediately. Very different investment, return on investment.
It's a great opportunity for us to kind of plug our latest business service, which is Foundry X, which is a trading desk and marketplace for buying new and used ASIC equipment, right? a lot of it is figuring out like the right counterparties to work with. There's a lot of risk. Not only are you paying oftentimes 6 to 9 months for pre-orders in advance, sometimes you just get scammed, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes people don't deliver or hold up their end of the bargains, or the relationships aren't there. So it's good to work with a trusted counterparty like ours or others out there that are proven.
Yeah. And look, there's volatility in the spot market just as there is in the Bitcoin price. If you follow Buffett's advice and you're fearful when others are greedy and you're greedy when others are fearful, you could have filled your boost with S9s for $20 not that long ago.
And those are going to last years.
Oh, sorry.
Yep. No, go ahead.
Yeah, it's also for us, like Easy to Mine used to operate under the brand name of YE. So we have been like selling and trading second-handed machines for like 5 to 6 years. And last year, because of the ban, so actually many miners, they have to dispose their miners. So it's very active in that market. So we're trying to see if there's any opportunity here in the US as well in the future.
I was purchasing used S7s from his boss, Lee. This is like 4 or 5 years ago. So trusted counterparty right here.
Are they still running, or are they in the landfill now?
So they were part of the kind of collateral damage of the China blanket bans. But like you mentioned earlier, you guys are migrating a lot of your operations to North America.
Yes.
Excellent. Sam, I've got another question for you. On ESG, we mentioned social. How does Bitcoin mining affect local economies?
Yeah, I can just yeah. I can just share one of my experience. It's actually a very dramatic site visiting experience. It's like I visit some mining site in very remote area, in mountainous area. We have to drive like 6 hours in a mountain. It's only one lane into a valley. There's a mining site there. So it's good for the local economy. In my mind, it's because it's not on the grid. So, and also it's because it's the wet season, they have the hydropower, it's gonna be wasted anyway. So if you utilize that to mine, will help the local people and the employment as well.
You mentioned that it's not on the grid, and we hear people talk about the risks of on-grid versus off-grid mining with regards to geopolitics. How do you analyze that trade-off?
Yeah, people always say there's pros and cons. For me, based on our experience, because we have a lot of experience in mining in Sichuan, which is like a perfect place for hydropower. And so it's riskier for the off-grid mining because the risk comes with the return because the price of the utility is much cheaper, but you lack the transparency of the rating, of the rates, and also you don't know if the supplier has full compliance with local policy. And I think the third one is not stable because it depends on like if it's raining or not. So in general, I think the on-the-grid is more stable, and that's what we are looking for in US and in North America for now. Yeah.
Very interesting. Okay, I've got a question for Samir. I think this is top of mind for folks. El Salvador, is it an opportunity or is it mostly marketing?
El Salvador made a big splash last year by accepting Bitcoin as legal tender. That's a separate topic from Bitcoin mining. Two different things. We were actually invited to El Salvador as a government official delegation, and my CEO, Brian Bullitt, and I, we went there about a year ago, roughly. And it was really interesting to see their infrastructure. It's really at early stages, but it's very interesting because they have volcanic geothermal energy, which is similar to what Iceland has. But again, the infrastructure is not there yet. But great promises. They're creating Bitcoin City. They're building, that infrastructure around the volcano. They're building this city, very friendly towards Bitcoin. My slight concern is if this particular administration is voted out one day, will the next administration do like a violent U-turn on Bitcoin? So I don't know what will happen. But the current administration, we should all be very supportive because this country is a case study of what that leadership has done, and it's really admirable. El Salvador was basically never talked about before the president did that, and now it's on everyone's map. They're looking at it very closely. And if they succeed, we all succeed. So I'm very supportive.
Excellent. So on this topic of friendly jurisdictions, I'd be interested in all of your thoughts on the friendliest and the least friendly. We'll start with you, Kevin, if you...
Yeah, sure. So if you take a friendly jurisdiction, I think Texas, everyone's very familiar with, right? You have, you have the leader of ERCOT going on publicly saying we welcome Bitcoin miners. It leads to grid stability, right? They're really taking the time to educating themselves on what Bitcoin mining actually has to offer. Whereas you have other jurisdictions, like unfortunately like New York State, where we're from, where they're constantly trying to add moratoriums, blanket bans, et cetera. And once again, they're not even asking their constituents. It was one of the first ban attempts they had last year. It was the union electrical workers that came out in defense of the Bitcoin mining activities. They were very in New York and another.
Miami.